Chapter 1009. From Zhao Yuanfeng's incident, Chu Xiu could tell that the relationship between Hua Xingzuan's foster sons was not harmonious. Now, it was even more obvious. According to the ranking, Qiu Tianya had disappeared, so Bailey Pobing was the leader. Therefore, if he wanted to speak and present a congratulatory gift, he should have been the first to speak. But now Fu Longxiao had taken the lead. Moreover, Fu Longxiao was very good at business. His Blue Dragon fleet traveled between the Windbreaker Sea and the Breezy Sea, bringing in a huge amount of resource trading revenue every time. Although Bailey Pobing was also the master of an island, he was just a boorish fellow. Before Kang Dongming crippled his legs, Naylan Hai had some tricks up his sleeves. Unfortunately, after his legs were crippled, he was unable to recover. He lived in seclusion on a nameless island with only a few servants serving him. He could not be said to have any influence. Therefore, among Hua Xingzuan's foster sons, Fu Longxiao was the strongest. After Fu Longxiao, Bailey Pobing and Naylan Hai presented their gifts. However, compared to Fu Longxiao's Sea Bodhi, their gifts were much shabbier. Bailey Pobing presented a godly weapon. Seeing this, Chu Xiu shook his head slightly. After being someone else's foster son for so many years, how could he not see what level Hua Xingzuan was? Even if you gave him Listen to Spring Rain, Hua Xingzuan probably wouldn't take a liking to it. It was useless. As for Naylan Hai, what he presented was even shabbier. It turned out to be a calligraphy and painting he wrote. However, the calligraphy and painting were full of sword chi. It was obvious that Naylan Hai had put a lot of thought into it. It could even be said that a real pellet state martial artist could use this calligraphy and painting as a martial arts secret manual. However, it was still useless for Hua Xingzuan. So for these two people, Hua Xingzuan just smiled gently. He was not as happy as when he received Fu Longxiao's birthday gift. After the three presented their gifts, the rest handed the gifts to the Hua family servants in order, and then the other party read out the names. In fact, the gifts given by the servants were very ordinary. Basically, there was nothing too outrageous. As long as it was not too bad, it was fine. Hua Xingzuan held a birthday celebration every few years. Who would have the financial resources to prepare so many heavenly materials and earthly treasures every time? When it was Chu Xiu's turn, the servant of the Hua family looked at what Chu Xiu handed to him, and he was slightly taken aback. It turned out to be something like a blueprint, but after seeing the explanation on it, he was so shocked that he almost shouted out. He calmed his emotions and shouted, "Long Gorge Island's Xiao Ziki presents a relic weapon blueprint." Because Chu Xiu came with Xiao Ziki's invitation, the servant of the Hua family didn't know Chu Xiu, so the name he read was also Xiao Ziki's. But when they heard this, the people present suddenly exploded. Relic weapon blueprint? This Xiao Ziki isn't good enough? How could he take out such a thing as a birthday gift? Whether it was in the Central Plains or overseas, relic weapon blueprints were extremely precious. It could even be said that relic weapon blueprints were more expensive than relic weapons. The reason was very simple. It was because relic weapons could not be replicated. 99% of weapon refinement grandmasters could forge a relic weapon, but if you asked them to forge an identical relic weapon, it could be said to be extremely difficult. It could even be said to be basically impossible. Part of the reason for forging a relic weapon was the materials, weapon refinement grandmaster's level was another, and luck was another. Therefore, relic weapons could not be mass-produced because luck was something that no one could predict. But now, what Chu Xiu took out was the blueprint of the heavenly war case. This thing was between a mechanism and a weapon. As long as there were enough materials and it was completely forged according to the blueprint, it would definitely be a relic weapon, the kind that could be completely replicated. This kind of thing was much more precious. In fact, in history, there were only a few relic weapons like the heavenly war case that could be replicated. They might not be the strongest relic weapon, but they were the most stable. Therefore, such a blueprint was even more precious than a relic weapon. Now that Chu Xiu no longer needed the heavenly war case, there was no harm in taking it out as a congratulatory gift. Most importantly, if the heavenly war case was used as an ordinary weapon, it would even be weaker than most relic weapons. Only with the Black Tortoise True technique, the heavenly war case would be the real heavenly war case. Of course, Chu Xiu would not hand over the Black Tortoise True technique so easily. At this moment, seeing that everyone's eyes were on Chu Xiu, Xiao Ziki hurriedly said, "Everyone, this congratulatory gift is not from me but from official Chu." Everyone immediately turned their eyes to Chu Xiu. Only a few people present knew him, and most of them were still wondering who this person was. At this time, Pak Donglai, the pavilion leader of Tian Yishui Hall whom Chu Xiu had met before, stood out and said, "This is Lord Chu Xiu of the Central Plains. In the Central Plains, he is also a famous diabolism overlord, and even controls a country's Wulin. As he spoke, Pak Donglai briefly introduced the identity of Chu Xiu to everyone. Although it was a brief introduction, it still surprised everyone present. This person was really a big shot. The overseas region was much more realistic than the Central Plains, and there were not many differences between the Orthodox and the Devil. Therefore, they did not object to Chu Xiu's identity as a diabolism cultivator. In the Central Plains, the Orthodox and the Devil were divided into two. Chu Xiu controlled half of the diabolism, and he even controlled the Jianghu forces of a country. This was a rather shocking power. Bailey Pobbing and Nayland Hai, who were above, looked at each other, their eyes filled with doubt. What was Chu Xiu doing here? Why did he give such a precious birthday gift to foster father? They subconsciously turned their eyes to Huo Xingzuan, but they found that Huo Xingzuan was looking at Chu Xiu in a daze, as if he was looking at some rare treasure, and his eyes were even shining slightly. At this moment, Huo Xingzuan was indeed very excited. In his eyes, Chu Xiu was indeed a rare treasure, the kind that he had never seen or heard of before. As the most powerful person in the entire breezy ocean, it could even be said that Huo Xingzuan did not directly say that he was the master of the entire breezy ocean. The reason why he had such a status today was because of his 5 foster sons. Huo Xingzuan had never denied this. Therefore, many people suspected that he was proficient in the art of divination, that he was a great grandmaster, or that he had some kind of rare treasure on him. However, they had all guessed wrong. Huo Xingzuan did not know the art of divination. He did not even understand the cultivation of the martial way, let alone something as advanced as the art of divination. He did not have any rare treasure on him either. In fact, it should be said that his luck had never been very good. He had never even opened a secret box and found anything good. However, he was able to achieve what he had today by relying on an opportunity, an enormous opportunity. Huo Xingzuan was not originally a cultivator. He was only the son of a fisherman on a small island, and it was possible that he had nothing to do with the martial way in this life. However, when he was young, something had completely changed his fate. It was when Huo Xingzuan was in his teens. He was drying his fishing net on the shore, when a man in white robes, who looked like an immortal, came treading on the water. Under Huo Xingzuan's shocked gaze, the man asked him for directions. Huo Xingzuan had told him. The immortal had patted his head, thanked him and left. From then on, Huo Xingzuan felt that his body had become much lighter and stronger. He had even been valued by an island lord who had passed by and had been taken in as a follower. After he had started cultivating the martial way, he had discovered that his body had undergone some changes. As long as he concentrated on looking at a person, he would be able to see a ray of light from that person's body. Some were bright, some were dark. Later, as he had slowly explored, he had discovered that people who had a bright ray of light would definitely have extraordinary achievements in the future. They might even be able to soar into the sky one day. As for those who had a dim ray of light, they might be unlucky at any time, no matter how glorious they were. At that time, he had discovered that he could actually see a person's future luck. This kind of luck was very blurry and he could only see it once. He was not sure if the person's luck would decrease after the person's luck increased. However, the more he saw, the more he could judge how far the person would go in the future based on the intensity of the ray of light. Therefore, Huo Xingzuan relied on his own opportunities to cling on to some people who seemed to be in dire straits now, but would have a rising destiny in the future. Huo Xingzuan would gain their trust, and when they rose he would also follow them to the heavens. Therefore, even if Huo Xingzuan's martial arts talent was not the kind of amazing, he was still living a good life, and his path had been smooth sailing. What happened after that was much simpler. Huo Xingzuan met Chou Tianya, who was still a teenager. The light on Chou Tianya's body was so blinding that Huo Xingzuan's eyes hurt. Hence, Huo Xingzuan decisively took Chou Tianya as his godson and raised him for tens of years. Finally, Chou Tianya reached the peak and helped him build the foundation of the Supreme Island. Later on, he met Bailey Pobbing and the others and he took them in as his foster sons before they were famous in Jianghu. Although the rays of light from them were much dimmer than Chou Tianya's, they were already the brightest among all the people he had met. Relying on his ability to read people, Huo Xingzuan managed to get to where he was today. He had seen the rays of light from his own children, but they were all extremely dim. It was obvious that they were not important figures. Therefore, there were rumors in the outside world that he treated his adopted sons better than his own. This was indeed true because he only had these few adopted sons to rely on. As for his descendants, even if they were his own, none of them lived up to his expectations. This was Huo Xingzuan's deepest secret. He did not even tell his wife and son about it. All this while, Huo Xingzuan had thought that he was a person favored by the heavens. When the immortal touched my head, I tied my hair and received eternal life. The person he met in the past must have been the legendary immortal. He had always been making use of the opportunities given by the immortal. Today he felt that his opportunity had arrived again. He also saw a strong ray of light from Chu Xiu, but it was different from Bailey Pobing and the others. It was also different from Qiu Tianyas. In the instant that he used his mind to look at Chu Xiu, he thought that he saw the sun. Chapter 10:10. At this moment, Chu Xiu did not know that Hua Xingzuan was thinking so much at this moment. He had presented such an expensive gift to attract the attention of others. And now he had achieved his goal. However, at this moment, Naylan Hai spoke in an ambiguous tone. Official Chu came all the way from Eastern Qi to my breezy sea. I'm afraid it's not as simple as celebrating foster father's birthday, right? Foster father has had so many birthday parties, but why haven't I seen official Chu come before? Upon hearing this, everyone present was stunned. Previously they were shocked by Chu Xiu's identity and did not think of this point. The Central Plains and the overseas territories were mainly trade between them and not to take root in the overseas territories. Who would be so bored to come and present gifts to Hua Xingzuan? Not to mention the Central Plains, even the Windbreak Sea, which was close to the Breezy Sea, had never been here before. Just now, Fu Longxiao said that he could invite the big shots and experts of the Windbreak Sea region to celebrate Hua Xingzuan's birthday. This was already a great honor for him. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "One doesn't visit without a cause. I'm here this time because I have something to discuss with the Fifth Lord Hua. I'm sure everyone has heard about the dispute between the Central Plains warriors. Eastern Qi has started a war, and the Central Plains warriors are in a state of chaos. This time, I'm here to seek the cooperation of the Eastern Sea and attack Eastern Qi from behind. After staying on the island for so long, don't you want to try going ashore?" Everyone present had different expressions. No one expected Chu Xiu to have such a grand plan in his trip to the Eastern Sea. Most of the martial artists in the Eastern Sea knew about the news of Eastern Qi. The martial artists in the Eastern Sea could ignore the Central Plains warriors, but they couldn't ignore the trade that concerned them. The war that Eastern Qi had started this time involved too many people. Everywhere was under martial law, and even the trade to the Eastern Sea had been delayed. Some of the cultivation resources in the Central Plains had never been produced by the East Sea. They had to rely on trade between the two sides to obtain them. But now they were very scarce. In the past, Jiangshan Pavilion was in charge of this business. Now that Jiangshan Pavilion had gone to the Central Plains to establish a new country, the number of businessmen in Eastern Qi had decreased by a lot, which made them very anxious. However, at this moment, Naylan Hai said coldly, "Official Chu, please go back. The warriors of the Eastern Sea have always been used to freedom. We do not wish to get involved in the turmoil of the Central Plains warriors. Even if you personally come to ask for help, we will not agree." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "You're wrong. I'm not here to ask for help. As I said before, I'm here to ask for cooperation." Before Chu Xiu could say anything, Naylan Hai waved his hand and said, "We don't need cooperation either." A cold glint flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had dared to interrupt him. At this moment, Hua Xingzuan waved his hand and said, "The fourth prince, he's a guest from afar. Let him finish what he wants to say." When Naylan Hai heard that his godfather had already spoken, he didn't dare to say anything else. However, Naylan Hai was a little puzzled. Why was his godfather treating Chu Xiu so kindly? It had to be known that his godfather had always been hostile to the martial artists of the Central Plains. Hua Xingzuan was the overlord of the Cool Breeze Sea, the invisible ruler. What he was most worried about was that someone would shake his authority. Such people were most likely to appear in the Central Plains. After all, the distance between the two places was not far. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Fifth Lord Hua, whether it's the Central Plains or overseas, we only seek one thing, benefits. With all due respect, although the overseas territories are not weak, they are definitely not strong either. Therefore, if the overseas territories dared to cause trouble in the Eastern Qi martial arts world, they would most likely suffer heavy casualties and be beaten back. They might even seal off trade. When that time comes, the overseas territories would be the ones to suffer. But now it's different. The Central Plains warriors are in chaos. This matter was instigated by Eastern Qi. Eastern Qi's defenses in the entire East Sea are now empty. If you take this opportunity to occupy a few counties, or even control the coast of Eastern Qi, it won't be difficult. Moreover, with the Northern Yen Imperial Court and all the forces of the Devil Path keeping them in check, I guarantee that Eastern Qi won't be able to find the strength to go back to support them in a short time. This matter is almost in the bag. Everyone attacking the outside is better than attacking the inside, right? Moreover, we won't be able to gain anything from the inside. When they heard Chu Xiu's words, most of the people present were tempted. It should be said that some forces near the coast had tried to step into the Central Plains warriors, but they had all met with tragic ends. This was not only because of the forces of the martial arts world in the Central Plains, but also because of the Eastern Qi Imperial Court's strict defense. After all, the overseas lands were all islands. They didn't have some resources, so they had to rely on the Central Plains to obtain them. As for the Central Plains, some of the special products of the overseas lands were dispensable. It was easy to find something to replace them. Therefore, the overseas land's desire for the Central Plains was extremely high. Of course, this matter still depended on the Fifth Lord Hua's opinion. A snake could not be without a head. If the overseas people charged forward like a mass of loose sand, even if Eastern Qi didn't have much power to defend the coast, they still wouldn't be able to break through. Only when the forces of the entire overseas lands were linked together could they break through the Eastern Qi's defense. And now, the person with the greatest power and prestige in the entire overseas lands was the Fifth Lord Hua. At this time, Naylan Hai snorted coldly and said, "Chu Xiu, your words are better than your singing. Do you really think no one knows about your situation in the Central Plains? The forces of the East Sea attacked the border of Eastern Qi's coast and put pressure on Eastern Qi, but in the end, you were the one who benefited. This is equivalent to us helping you share the burden, but you are here talking about cooperation. What a joke." Chu Xiu frowned. This Naylan Hai had always been against him. Previously, Chu Xiu thought that he had unintentionally offended him, but now it seemed that this person was purely dark and suspicious, and would subconsciously doubt everyone. Chu Xiu didn't find it strange that this kind of person had his legs chopped off by Kang Dongming. Chu Xiu had come into contact with Kang Dongming before. He was a person who had nothing but a sword. With Kang Dongming's character, he would never take the initiative to conflict with anyone. When Kang Dongming attacked Naylan Hai, it must be because this guy kept blocking Kang Dongming's way, which forced Kang Dongming to attack. Even now, Chu Xiu couldn't help but want to attack and cripple his two arms. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Island Master Naylan's words are wrong. I benefit, but don't tell me you don't benefit? When doing something, don't look at how much others benefit. No matter how much others benefit, it is still others. First, you have to look at whether you will suffer a loss or gain, isn't that right? If you attack Eastern Qi, I will be the only one who benefits, but you will be the one who loses. Then I will be using you. But if we attack now, both of us will benefit. If this isn't cooperation, what is it?" Naylan Hai still wanted to say something, but Chu Xiu said indifferently, "May I ask, is the ruler of Supreme Island the Fifth Lord Hua or you, Naylan Hai? It seems that I gave this gift to the wrong person. It should be given to you, Island Master Naylan, and not to the Fifth Lord Hua." Naylan Hai's expression suddenly changed. He just realized that he had indeed overstepped his boundaries just now. The Fifth Lord Hua didn't say much. He was the only one talking. Even the disciples of the Hua family looked at him unkindly. "Chu Xiu, don't try to sow discord between my godfather and me." Chu Xiu spread out his hands and said, "The Fifth Lord Hua hasn't rejected it yet, and you're already rejecting it on his behalf. I'm not trying to sow discord. This is the truth." Just as Naylan Hai was about to say something, the Fifth Lord Hua waved his hand and said, "All right, the Fourth Prince, don't speak for now." Naylan Hai retreated to the side with a gloomy face. The Fifth Lord Hua looked at Chu Xiu with a kind gaze. Does Chu really need the help of the East Sea? Chu Xiu didn't hide anything. He said directly, "If we fight head-on, my side might not lose, but we will suffer great losses. If we join forces with the martial artists of the East Sea to attack Eastern Qi will definitely lose. Therefore, if I don't need the martial artists of the East Sea to make a move, I wouldn't have come here personally." The Fifth Lord Hua nodded and said, "All right, I agree to this matter." When he said this, not only were the others shocked, but even Chu Xiu was shocked. He didn't expect the Fifth Lord Hua to agree so quickly. However, at this time, the Fifth Lord Hua suddenly said, "However, I have another request. As long as you can agree to it, Chu, I will immediately gather my men and attack Eastern Qi." "What request?" Chu Xiu wasn't surprised by the Fifth Lord Hua's request. If the Fifth Lord Hua had agreed so simply, Chu Xiu would have been surprised. The Fifth Lord Hua looked at Chu Xiu, and there was an unconcealable look of surprise in his eyes. "Chu, you've come all the way from a humble background. You're definitely one of the most outstanding people in the world, and I am also very excited. In the entire overseas region, I can be considered to have some fame and influence, and I'm much older than you, Chu. Why don't we do this? Today, in front of everyone, I will accept you as my godson. From now on, we'll all be family and there won't be any need to work together. When a family member is in trouble, how can I not help? Moreover, you don't have to worry about being bound to the East Sea after you become Ai's godson. Although I is old, I'm still very open-minded. If Qiu Qinya wants to pursue the pinnacle of swordsmanship, I won't stop him. If Zhao Yuanfeng wants to go back to the Central Plains to build his country, I won't stop him either. After solving the problem of Eastern Qi, if Chu wants to go back to the Central Plains, I won't stop you either. What do you think, Chu? The fifth Lord Hua still had a kind smile on his face, as if he was waiting for Chu Xiu to bow down to him. However, he didn't notice that the smile on Chu Xiu's face was gradually disappearing. Chapter 10-11. Everyone present really didn't expect the request of the fifth Lord Hua. They couldn't have guessed that the fifth Lord Hua was already so old, yet he still wanted to accept a godson. Most importantly, this godson was different from his previous ones. Among the godson accepted by the fifth Lord Hua before, the strongest one at the beginning should be Fu Longxiao. At that time he was already a famous pirate who had reached the real pellet state. He accidentally plundered the ship of the Hua family, but he was valued by the fifth Lord Hua and accepted as a godson. There was also Zhao Yuanfeng. Although he was not the patriarch at that time, he was also at the real pellet state. But Chu Xiu was now a famous big shot in the underworld. It could be said that his status was not much worse than Hua Xingzuan's. Now that you accepted him as a godson, no matter how you looked at it, it felt like you were taking advantage of him. They didn't know what Hua Xingzuan saw. In the eyes of Hua Xingzuan, Chu Xiu's future achievements would be even higher than his current achievements. Accepting him as a godson, the benefits were simply immeasurable. However, Hua Xingzuan had neglected one point, and that was that people's thoughts were different at different stages of life. Now if he wanted to accept Fu Longxiao, who was already the master of the Blue Dragon Fleet, as a godson, Fu Longxiao might not agree, let alone Chu Xiu. His own father was killed by Chu Xiu, not to mention that he had to acknowledge a godson now. So Chu Xiu stood up directly and said faintly, "It seems that the fifth Lord Hua still doesn't want to cooperate with me. Well, I will leave now." Hua Xingzuan frowned and said, "Chu, with Ai's strength in this Qingfeng Sea, it shouldn't be a disgrace to you, right? You refused without even considering it? Moreover, everyone in the Cool Breeze Sea knows that I, Hua Xingzuan, treat my godson better than my own. If it wasn't for me, who would be able to reach this stage? When you were in the Central Plains Warriors, you were targeted by the righteous sections. If you acknowledge me as your adoptive father, the entire breezy ocean will be your backup." Chu Xiu said faintly, "Fifth Lord Hua, I've told you that I'm here to cooperate with you, not to beg for help. Besides, I'm not interested in finding myself another father." Hearing this, Nalen Hai and the other two's expressions darkened. What did he mean by finding another father? Chu Xiu's words included all three of them. Hua Xingzuan's patience was running out. He snorted coldly and said, "Cooperate? Could it be that you want to become sworn brothers with I? The overseas region is different from the Central Plains. I don't believe in agreements or anything like that. I only believe in my own people. Only my own people. I dare to help them unconditionally, regardless of whether it's a loss or a gain. Let me ask you one last time. Are you really going to reject I?" Hee. With a chuckle, Chu Xiu turned around and left. Yi Buishuan could only follow behind him. Hua Xingzuan's expression was now completely dark. He snorted coldly and said, "Chu Xiu, if you leave today, you won't have another chance. In the entire breezy ocean, if I don't say anything, who would dare to help you?" Chu Xiu stopped in his tracks. Just when everyone thought that he was going to give in, Chu Xiu turned around and said faintly, "One must abide by the rules. If you can't do it, you can't accept the gift. Return my divine weapons blueprint." A strange expression appeared on everyone's faces. If you can't do it, you want to take back the gift you've given. It seems like Chu Xiu is the one who doesn't care about rules. "Chu Xiu, how dare you?" Bailey Pobbing snorted coldly. He had long disliked this Chu Xiu. At this moment, seeing that Chu Xiu had repeatedly rejected his foster father, Chu Xiu was definitely not one of them. Therefore he took a step forward, and the armor on his body carried an extremely violent power. It was like a mountain crashing down on Chu Xiu. Bailey Pobbing was known as the East Sea's #1 general. His physique was the best in the entire East Sea. Even if he was empty-handed, he could still take on divine weapons. After Qiu Qinya left, he was Hua Xingzuan's #1 expert. Chu Xiu punched with an expressionless face. The true fire of inner force suddenly bloomed, and dyed his body into a bright gold and silver color. With the majestic fist intent of the mountain and sea fist scripture, Chu Xiu's fist smashed down and collided with Bailey Pobbing's fist. With the two of them as the center, a strong wave suddenly exploded, and the formation in the hall was instantly activated. The moment the two fists collided, Bailey Pobbing's expression suddenly changed. A powerful force that made people tremble came. Even though he had used all the strength in his body, he still couldn't resist it. The armor on his body cracked under Chu Xiu's punch and he couldn't help but step back. With every step back, a big pit appeared under his feet. The whole hall was like an earth dragon turning over. After retreating 9 steps, hundredly broken soldiers finally managed to neutralize that force. However, the armor on his entire right arm had already been completely shattered. Everyone present looked at Chu Xiu in shock. None of these overseas martial artists had seen Chu Xiu fight. Even if some of them knew about Chu Xiu, information was still information, and it was a different concept from the person himself. At this time, seeing that Chu Xiu had forced back the #1 warrior of East Sea, Bailey Pobbing, with one punch and made him look so miserable, how could they not be shocked? Seeing that Bailey Pobbing was at a disadvantage, Fu Longshao and Nailan Hai were ready to attack. However, at this time, Hua Xingzuan snorted coldly and said, "Give him the blueprint and let him go." Today was his birthday and he didn't want to see blood at such a time. Seeing that his godfather had spoken, Nailan Hai and the others had no choice but to stop and let Chu Xiu leave with the blueprint. Watching Chu Xiu's back as he left, Hua Xingzuan looked gloomy. Today was not a happy day for him. He had let Chu Xiu leave not only because he didn't want to fight on his birthday, but also because he was a little afraid of Chu Xiu. He hadn't forgotten the sun-like radiance on Chu Xiu's body. In fact, if Hua Xingzuan had been more rational today, even if Chu Xiu had rejected Chu Xiu's request to be his godson, he wouldn't have needed to become sworn brothers with him. As long as he agreed to this matter, it would be good to make friends with him. After all, he could see that Chu Xiu would have limitless achievements in the future. However, it was a pity that people changed. If it had been more than 100 years ago, he would have done so. But now, even if he knew the cause and effect, he couldn't put down his pride and show goodwill to Chu Xiu after he had rejected him. This was because Hua Xingzuan wasn't the Hua Xingzuan from 100 years ago. Now he was the supreme of the entire Breeze Sea, the 5th Lord Hua. Being a supreme for 100 years had already changed Hua Xingzuan's mentality. In the past, he was willing to show goodwill to those young elites with limitless futures. Even if he didn't accept them as his godson, he would still show goodwill to them. But now he felt that Chu Xiu had disrespected him. This was something he couldn't tolerate. Of course, there was another point that Hua Xingzuan himself might not have noticed. He had relied on his own abilities to unearth so many young elites. But in reality, this kind of investment required time. He had to wait for them to grow. Hua Xingzuan was already 380 years old. How many more years could he live? Even if Chu Xiu could reach the heaven and earth mystic realm in the future, he probably wouldn't live to see that day. Since that was the case, why would he want to form good karma with him? As for now, with Bailey Pobbing and the others around, he could stay as the supreme of the Breeze Sea until he died. At this moment, Fu Longshao walked over with a wine glass and said, "Godfather, don't be angry. Chu Xiu doesn't know what's good for him. Why do you have to stoop to his level? Without your help, he would have made a wasted trip to the Breeze Sea. Don't bother about him. The birthday banquet will continue." Hua Xingzuan snorted coldly and said, "This young man doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He has made a name for himself in the martial world of the Central Plains. Does he really think that everyone in the Eastern Sea will give him face?" Everyone else present also complimented Hua Xingzuan and asked him to calm down. After cleaning up, the hall was instantly filled with singing and dancing. Outside the Supreme Island, Yi Buoxuan smiled bitterly and said, "Official Chu, you were too rash just now. You offended Hua Xingzuan. We can leave the East Sea directly. If he doesn't say anything, no force in the entire Breeze Sea will help you. Isn't it just acknowledging him as your godfather? That old man's age is there for all to see. You won't lose out if you compromise. If you're not willing, just treat it as using him. After defeating Eastern Chi, don't bother with him anymore. That's all." Yi Buoxuan really didn't understand why Chu Xiu was so stubborn. He could tell that Hua Xingzuan really wanted to adopt Chu Xiu as his son. If he agreed, Chu Xiu's future would be incomparably smooth. Who would have thought that he would reject it? Chu Xiu said plainly, "Master Yi, there are some things that I don't think you do. You've also said that acknowledging him as your adoptive father is a compromise. But with my current status, why would I need to compromise? Moreover, Hua Xingzuan, is he worthy of being my godfather? Is he worthy? What a joke. Yi Buxuan thought about it carefully and realized that it was true. Chu Xiu had always been stubborn. Moreover, he was like a master and a father to Wei Shuya. Wei Shuya had even handed over all the connections he had accumulated in the Yinma clan to Chu Xiu. It was as if he was treating Chu Xiu as his successor. But even so, Wei Shuya didn't ask Chu Xiu to acknowledge him as his godfather. Judging from Hua Xingzuan's appearance, apart from his better eyesight, he really couldn't be compared to Wei Shuya. But when he thought about his eyesight, Yi Buxuan sighed, but this old man's eyesight is really extraordinary. Ever since he adopted Zhao Yuanfeng as his son, he hasn't adopted a son for decades. This time he thinks highly of you, Official Chu. It also proves that, Official Chu, you will definitely be extraordinary in the future. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, does he need to see this kind of thing? It's not that I'm boasting, but even a blind person can see this kind of thing. Yi Buxuan patted his head. He had forgotten about this. Based on Chu Xiu's current age and achievements, even an idiot would know that his future was limitless. In the past, Hua Xingzuan adopted Chu Xiu as his son. Now that he adopted Chu Xiu as his son, he simply wanted to pick up a ready-made one. The meaning was different. It was simply taking advantage of others when they were in a difficult situation. No wonder Chu Xiu became hostile on the spot. Chapter 10-12. The human heart was the hardest thing to control. If today's scene had happened when Chu Xiu and Chu Xiu were still weak and struggling to survive, perhaps it would have been another story that verified Hua Xingzuan's divine eyes. Unfortunately, Hua Xingzuan only remembered Chu Xiu's age and neglected Chu Xiu's identity and strength, which led to a complete fallout between them. Fortunately, he had been cautious all these years and did not fall out on the spot. Otherwise, it might have turned into a murder case. Anyway, it was not the first time that Chu Xiu had killed someone at a birthday banquet, so he was used to it. Just as Chu Xiu was about to leave, a voice suddenly rang out, Official Chu, take care. Chu Xiu turned around and saw that it was Pak Donglai who had chased after him. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, Mr. Bo, aren't you afraid of offending the fifth Lord Hua by following me? Pak Donglai chuckled and said, at this time the fifth Lord Hua has a lot of people flattering him. Why would he pay attention to me? And if I was afraid of offending him in the past, I'm not afraid now. At this point, Pak Donglai's expression suddenly turned serious and said, Official Chu, you want to borrow the power of the East Sea to attack Eastern Qi, but today you've fallen out with Hua Xingzuan. Don't underestimate his influence in the breezy sea. I'm afraid this time you will really return in failure. Chu Xiu said lightly, it doesn't matter. I'll just take it as coming to the East Sea to experience the local customs. Seeing that Chu Xiu was not in a hurry, Pak Donglai said in a deep voice, Official Chu, I won't beat around the bush with you. I agree with what you said just now. Only when both sides benefit is it called cooperation. So this time, why don't we cooperate? Cooperate with what? With a dark look in his eyes, Pak Donglai said in a low voice, you help me kill Hua Xingzuan, and I will help you gather the Jianghu forces in the East Sea to attack Eastern Qi. When he said this, Chu Xiu's expression didn't change, but Yi Buxuan was shocked. Pak Donglai could be considered as a top figure in the breezy ocean. You could say that he was generous and straightforward or that he was scheming, but his influence could not be compared to Hua Xingzuan. Who would have thought that he would actually dare to have such thoughts about Hua Xingzuan, who had dominated the breezy ocean for 100 years? His guts were not small. Pak Donglai looked around and said, there are too many people here. Official Chu, my Taiyan Yishui Hall's ship is over there. Why don't we go in and talk? Chu Xiu paused for a few breaths, then nodded and said, sure. Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Pak Donglai heaved a sigh of relief. As long as Chu Xiu did not leave immediately and continued to talk with him, it meant that there was a chance of success. When they arrived at Pak Donglai's ship, Chu Xiu said in a low voice, Mr. Bo, there is one thing that I am curious about. Why are you doing this? Pak Donglai grinned and said, everyone wants to climb up. Is there a reason for this? Someone is blocking my way and he is not willing to give way. So I have to think of a way to solve this problem. Chuckling, Pak Donglai continued, all right, I will not keep you in suspense. Official Chu, I will tell you the truth. I have been wanting to make a move on Hua Xingzuan for a long time. Official Chu, you have not been in the East Sea for long. What you have heard about Hua Xingzuan is all sorts of mystical places. These things are indeed worth mentioning, but you definitely do not know about the rest. Hua Xingzuan's Paragon Island, or rather his Hua family, has already become the scourge of the breezy sea. Hua Xingzuan wants to dominate the East Sea? Pak Donglai laughed coldly and said, perhaps he has the intention, but he is old and does not have the energy to do so. The disgusting thing about the Hua family is that they will not directly swallow you up and use force. Instead, they will send a direct descendant of the Hua family to your sect and interfere with your sect's affairs in the form of helping to earn benefits. In my Tainishui Hall, there are already a few places occupied by the Hua family. None of Hua Xingzuan's sons are successful, so he thought of such a disgusting method to find a long-term meal ticket for his descendants. But does he really think that everyone is willing to swallow their anger? Chu Xiu couldn't help but shake his head after hearing this. He did not even know how to describe Hua Xingzuan. Exploiting his subordinates was also very particular, just like what Chu Xiu did in the Northern Yen martial world. I'll take your things, but I'll also give you some practical benefits. I'll let you see what your monthly offerings are spent on. Although the Northern Yen martial world sects are also feeling the pinch, at least they know that the offerings they take out are effective, and the price is clearly marked. That's all. Hua Xingzuan is doing better than Chu Xiu. But in reality it's like cutting flesh with a blunt knife, and you don't know how much he's going to cut. Hua Xingzuan's actions are simply making things difficult for his descendants. If he dies in the future, if his adopted sons do not choose to protect the Hua family's descendants, the entire Hua family will die a terrible death. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, if that's the case, then it's not easy for Hua Xingzuan to maintain the Supreme Island for so long. But I'm still curious. Why did you come to me? You must know that I'm from the Central Plains and I just came to the East Sea. Is this an impromptu idea? Pak Donglai smiled awkwardly and said, it's indeed an impromptu idea. But if official Chu is willing to help, the success rate will definitely increase greatly. Also, if official Chu didn't fall out with Hua Xingzuan, I wouldn't have come to you. The fifth Lord Hua's Supreme Island has been established in the breezy ocean for over 100 years. It's so powerful that it's unimaginable. So, I don't even dare to look for someone to work with, because I don't know if they'll betray me. But I'm very confident in official Chu because you're an outsider and you've just fallen out with Hua Xingzuan. With official Chu's personality, you've basically given up on the possibility of working with Hua Xingzuan. So, here in the breezy ocean, working with official Chu is the most reliable way. Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and looked at Pak Donglai. This person is indeed the first impression that Chu Xiu gave me. He's very scheming. According to Chu Xiu's guess, this person has wanted to make a move on Hua Xingzuan for a long time, but he forcefully endured it until now. In the hall just now, Chu Xiu subconsciously saw Pak Donglai. At that time, Pak Donglai presented a congratulatory gift to Hua Xingzuan respectfully. When he looked at Hua Xingzuan, his eyes were filled with admiration. No matter when Chu Xiu looked at him, his expression was the same. It's not difficult to act for a while, but it's difficult to continue acting like this. After a while, Chu Xiu smiled and said, I'm very impressed that you have the courage to challenge Hua Xingzuan in the breezy ocean. I like to work with smart people and I think Mr. Bo is a smart person. To Chu Xiu, as long as he can get martial artists from the East Sea to attack Eastern Qi, it doesn't matter who the person is. If Hua Xingzuan doesn't know what's good for him, then I'll just get someone else. Pak Donglai's reputation in the breezy ocean is not small, and it's not bad either. It seems like he has been secretly accumulating his reputation for this day. As long as he can get rid of Hua Xingzuan's faction, Pak Donglai will be able to take over, and he can also help him consolidate the power of the breezy ocean to attack Eastern Qi. Seeing that Chu Xiu has agreed, Pak Donglai also let out a long sigh. He has been planning this for a long time, and the reason why he hasn't executed it yet is because he lacks strength. Hua Xingzuan has dominated the breezy ocean for so many years, and he himself isn't worth mentioning. However, the power that he indirectly controls is incomparably strong, and Pak Donglai has no way of shaking it. At this moment, Hua Xingzuan's power is at its weakest. Zhao Yuanfeng went to the Central Plains to participate in the Central Plains Warriors competition. Coincidentally, Chu Xiu has a falling out with Hua Xingzuan. Pak Donglai can use this opportunity to get strong support from Chu Xiu and Yi Buxuan. This is an extremely rare opportunity, so he doesn't care that his plan hasn't been completed yet, and wants to pull Chu Xiu to his side. At this moment, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, Mr. Bo, since we've already teamed up, let's talk about the power that you have. I don't believe that Tainishui Hall alone can destroy the Supreme Island. Pak Donglai smiled. Official Chu is right. If I only have Tainishui Hall, I won't dare to attack the Supreme Island. I'm not that arrogant. Actually, there are many people in the East Sea who are dissatisfied with Hua Xingzuan's way of doing things. Many of them have already teamed up with me. For example, the leader of the Stormy Waves Alliance in the Breezy Ocean, Ko Shintong. He was born in the wilderness and he formed the Stormy Waves Alliance with those small islands. Although his subordinates aren't the strongest, they have the most people. He has a huge grudge against Huixingzuan's godson, Bailey Pobbing. He was once heavily injured by Bailey Pobbing, and his divine weapon was destroyed by Bailey Pobbing. Other than Ko Shintong, Tainishui Hall has also recruited many experts among the wandering cultivators. Although they're scattered all over the Breezy Ocean, they'll appear here as soon as they receive my message. Alright, there's another person that you should be familiar with, Official Chu. He's the leader of the Cetacean Society, Long Tianying. He's also on my side. The Cetacean Society is the largest merchant association between the Breezy Ocean and the Central Plains, and their trade volume is shocking. In the past, the Cetacean Society had the help of Saint Master Tam Yuan, so they could still get by. But ever since Master Tam Yuan passed away in the Central Plains, the Cetacean Society lost its backing and was suppressed. The Hua family teamed up with Zhao Yuanfeng and seized many of the Cetacean Society's trade routes. They forced the Cetacean Society to become a second-rate merchant association. If it wasn't for Master Tam Yuan's legacy, Long Tianying might even have lost his life. Many of the things in Tainishui Hall came from the Cetacean Society. We've teamed up to overthrow the Supreme Island. Now that you're here, Official Chu, I believe Leader Long will be very happy to see Official Chu. Chapter 10-13. After Huixingzuan's birthday celebration ended, Chu Xiu followed Pak Donglai to the island where Tainishui Hall was located and met the people that he had roped in. The leader of the Stormy Waves Alliance, Ko Shintong, was a straightforward man. He wasn't as scheming as Huixingzuan. He wanted to overthrow the Supreme Island purely because he couldn't stand the grudges of the past. Similarly, Chu Xiu also met Long Tianying of the Cetacean Society here. Long Tianying was so touched when he saw Chu Xiu that he almost teared up. Of course, Long Tianying had only met Chu Xiu once and they weren't close. He wasn't moved to tears because he saw Chu Xiu, but because he thought of Master Tam Yuan. Master Tam Yuan had given Long Tianying and the entire Cetacean Society a new lease on life. In the end, Master Tam Yuan passed away, and the Hua family simply slaughtered him like a pig or a sheep. Although Long Tianying had some power under him, he wasn't even a warrior compared to Pak Donglai's Tainishui Hall. He was just a businessman and he didn't even dare to resist. Long Tianying was reminded of Master Tam Yuan again when he saw Chu Xiu. He said with a sobbing tone, "I didn't expect to see Official Chu again today. If I had known, I wouldn't have returned to the East Sea. I would have stayed and guarded Master Tam Yuan's tomb for the rest of my life. It's better than living in fear overseas." Of course, Long Tianying was just joking. He had worked hard overseas for his entire life to build a top merchant association like the Cetacean Society. How could he give up so easily? Chu Xiu patted his shoulder and said, "President Long, you don't have to be so sad. I'm here today and the Hua family's tyrannical days are coming to an end. By then, the Cetacean Society will still be the biggest merchant association overseas." Chu Xiu didn't mind helping Long Tianying. Of course, Master Tam Yuan was also one of the reasons. Chu Xiu rarely owed anyone anything ever since he stepped into the martial world. And there were only a few elders who truly helped him. Old Man Wei was one of them. Master Tam Yuan was also one of them. Master Tam Yuan had given all his inheritance to Chu Xiu. Although Chu Xiu had cheated him out of it, he still owed Master Tam Yuan a big favor. Chu Xiu didn't like monks, but Master Tam Yuan was a true holy monk, the kind that people truly admired. Unfortunately, good people didn't live long in this world. Chu Kuanga was a good person, a hero and a great warrior, but he died in the prime of his life. Master Tam Yuan was a good person, a holy monk, but he died just as he stepped into the true fire spirit refinement realm. On the other hand, Huixingzuan allowed his useless descendants to dominate the East Sea. Although they didn't do anything evil, they weren't good people either. In the end, he lived longer than anyone else. Chu Xiu didn't want to die so early, so it was better to leave the job of being a hero to someone else. In the secret room, Pak Donglai said, "With the addition of Official Chu, the chances of us destroying Supreme Island will increase greatly. We should also plan how we should do it." Yi Buishuan said in disdain, "What's the point of planning? Official Chu and I will help you take care of Huixingzuan's 3 adopted sons. You have 2 true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists left. Do you think you can't take care of a dying old man like Huixingzuan? As for the others, Tainishui Hall and the Stormy Waves Alliance have so many people. Can't you deal with them?" Pak Donglai smiled bitterly, Master Yi, you're not from the East Sea, so you don't know how strong Supreme Island's foundation is after dominating the East Sea for over 100 years. Let's talk about Supreme Island first. Did you notice anything strange when you went there? But in reality, it's said that the entire Supreme Island is a huge machine forged by an ancient blacksmith master. It has endless power. No one knows if this is true or not, but I've sent people to check the history of Supreme Island. Before Huixingzuan appeared, there were indeed no islands in the sea. So, there's definitely something wrong with Supreme Island. There's also Huixingzuan's eldest adopted son, Qiu Tianya. Some people even said that he had reached the heaven and earth elemental state. Although he's gone missing, according to the information I've gathered, Qiu Tianya gave Huixingzuan something before he left. It might be a trump card, something that can at least protect Supreme Island. And don't forget the name of Huixingzuan, God's Eye. Everyone knows that Huixingzuan has 5 adopted sons. Why don't you know that he doesn't have a 6th? I got this information from a drunk Hua family disciple. He said that Huixingzuan seems to have another adopted son, but he rarely appears in front of everyone. He only guards in the dark. Even if Huixingzuan has been pampered for so many years, he also has the cultivation of true fire god refinement state. Does he need a real pellet state martial artist to guard him? So, it's obvious how strong the person guarding him is. Yi Buxuan frowned slightly and said, "Then what's your previous plan?" Pak Donglai waved his hand and said, "Sao discord." Among the 3 adopted sons of Huixingzuan, Nalan Hai is closer to Bailey Pobing, but the most powerful one is Fu Longxiao. Fu Longxiao's Blue Dragon fleet travels between the Windbreaker Sea and the Windbreaker Sea. He has a strong background and can bring a lot of benefits to Huixingzuan, so he is also the most favored by Huixingzuan. But because of this, his attitude towards Bailey Pobing and Nalan Hai is also quite arrogant, which made the two very unhappy. So, my plan is to send someone to infiltrate the Blue Dragon fleet and become Fu Longxiao's confidant, then find an opportunity to sow discord between them. When they turn hostile, I'll kill them in one fell swoop. After that, Pak Donglai looked at Chu Xiu and said, "What does official Chu think of this plan?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "Not bad. Sometimes, the biggest weakness of a person is not their appearance but their heart. But I don't have time to waste here. If I delay any longer, I'm afraid that the Northern Yen fleet will be destroyed by Eastern Qi." Pak Donglai smiled and said, "I almost forgot, official Chu is very experienced in this kind of thing. I wonder if official Chu has any good ideas?" Towards Chu Xiu's attitude, Pak Donglai wasn't angry. He wasn't at the level of Huixingzuan, who was used to being in a high position and couldn't tolerate being refuted. Moreover, he had a detailed understanding of Chu Xiu's information. In the Central Plains, Chu Xiu had destroyed countless families and clans. He was indeed very experienced in this kind of thing. Chu Xiu knocked on the table and said, "This seems very simple to me. Nalan Hai and the others live in different places. We just need to go to them one by one, kill them one by one, and then attack Supreme Island." Pak Donglai was dumbfounded and said, "That's it?" Chu Xiu nodded and said, "That's it. But what if we make any movements and arouse the suspicion of others? What should we do then?" Chu Xiu asked, "Your Tainyishui Hall is so big. You should have a formation master. You should be able to set up a formation that can temporarily seal off the aura of a small island, right?" Pak Donglai was stunned and said, "Yes, but..." Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "No buts. I'll do it for you. What you need to do is to set up the formation around us while I'm killing people. Just don't let the waves spread out. It doesn't have to take too long, 15 minutes will be enough. Oh yes, I'll pretend to leave the Qingfeng Ocean with Master Yi tomorrow. You can come and pick us up after we sail to an uninhabited sea area." Actually, in Chu Xiu's opinion, it was too easy to kill people silently in the East Sea's terrain. Everyone lived on different islands, and they were easily hundreds or even thousands of miles apart. It would take half a day to travel back and forth by boat. This was simply a natural barrier. After hearing Chu Xiu's plan, Pak Donglai was still a little hesitant, but he still nodded and agreed. He had not seen Chu Xiu's real means, but he still chose to believe the description of Chu Xiu in the information. Chu Xiu was able to rise up in the Central Plains, a place that was countless times crueler than overseas, so he was definitely not an impulsive and brainless person. The next day, Chu Xiu directly boarded a ship with Yi Buxuan to return to the South Sea. This scene was seen by many people. If Chu Xiu was said to not be famous in the Qingfeng Ocean before, then after he rejected Huixingzuan's request to be adopted as his son, almost everyone in the Qingfeng Ocean recognized Chu Xiu. After all, in so many years, Chu Xiu was the first person to reject Huixingzuan's offer. Moreover, most people felt that Chu Xiu did not know how to appreciate favors. Although Chu Xiu was in the true fire spirit refinement realm and was an important figure in the Central Plains warriors, which one of the people who were adopted by the fifth Lord Hua was not in the true fire spirit refinement realm? Which one of them was not an important figure? However, they neglected the fact that when these people were adopted by Hua Xingzuan, they did not have the strength and status that Chu Xiu had now. At this time, on Haoyan Island, Hua Xingzuan was slowly sipping a cup of specially made spiritual tea. This spiritual tea was filled with vitality. If the ingredients were used to refine pills, it could be used to refine 8th grade pills. However, he was drinking it like tea here. Has Chu Xiu left the Qingfeng Ocean? Hua Xingzuan asked. One of his direct descendants was serving by his side. When he heard that, he hurriedly said, "That unappreciative fellow has already left. The old ancestor has taken him in as his adopted son and given him so much face. Yet he still doesn't know how to appreciate favors. What a joke. Without the old ancestor's permission, who in the entire Qingfeng Ocean would dare to help him? If he doesn't scram back to the Central Plains with his tail between his legs, staying here is just a waste of time." Hua Xingzuan narrowed his eyes and said calmly, "Everyone has their own aspirations. If he is not willing, we can't force him, right?" Although Hua Xingzuan said that, he was still a little unhappy with Chu Xiu's rejection. All these years, no one had ever rejected him like this. Rejected his good intentions. However, Hua Xingzuan was not too angry. How many more years could he live? Since Chu Xiu had rejected him, then his future achievements had nothing to do with him. However, at this time in the uninhabited waters of the Qingfeng Ocean, Chu Xiu was already sitting on Tian Yishui Hall's ship. He stood at the bow of the ship and muttered, "It's time to kill." Chapter 10:14. Chu Xiu's first target was the nameless island where Nalin Hai was. Although Chu Xiu said that he only needed to kill people on the island, Pak Donglai still gave Chu Xiu a lot of information about Nalin Hai to be on the safe side. Although Chu Xiu thought that he didn't need to prepare so much to kill a cripple, he still looked through the information out of curiosity. After looking through it, Chu Xiu only had one comment about Nalin Hai. His heart was higher than the sky, but his life was thinner than paper. This person was considered relatively young among Hua Xingzuan's godson. Moreover, when he was adopted by Hua Xingzuan, he was only a child. Therefore, his actual age was even younger than Zhao Yuanfeng. At such a young age, he was adopted by Hua Xingzuan. In addition, his talent was also exceptionally good. Therefore, this had led to his arrogant and condescending personality. Apart from Hua Xingzuan's eldest adopted son, Qiu Tianya, and Bailey Pobing, who often took care of him when he was young, he did not put anyone in his eyes. Even if it was Hua Xingzuan's son who offended him, he would still beat him up without hesitation. This caused him to have a conflict with Kang Dongming in the future. Although he knew that he wasn't a match for Kang Dongming, he still pestered him. In the end, Kang Dongming killed him and crippled his legs. From then on, Nalin Hai's character became gloomy, violent, and incomparably eccentric. There used to be some servants on his nameless island. However, the number of servants dwindled, and they all ran away after being scolded and beaten by him. 2 days ago, when he returned from Supreme Island, the last few servants also ran away after being scolded by him. The reason why he was angry was none other than Chu Xiu. He was jealous of Chu Xiu. Back then he was just like Chu Xiu. At such a young age, he already had the strength of true fire spirit refinement state, and could stand shoulder to shoulder with the older generation. Moreover, he had Hua Xingzuan as his godfather. Who in the entire breezy ocean dared to challenge him? However, ever since he was crippled by Kang Dongming, he felt that everything had changed. His godfather no longer valued him, and Fu Longxiao even looked at him with disdain. And that Zhao Yuanfeng, the guy who came later, even dared to hire Kang Dongming as a guest, which was simply not putting him in his eyes. Back then he had even brought this matter to Hua Xingzuan, but all he got in return was a sentence from his godfather saying that they should be brothers. Nalin Hai had lost his composure when a person who was extremely arrogant ended up like this. Especially at a time like this, when he saw Chu Xiu, who was just as young and equally powerful, it made him feel even more upset. If his legs were not crippled, he would be the East Sea's Chu Xiu. That was why he had targeted Chu Xiu during the birthday celebration. Other than suspicion, there was also jealousy in it. At this moment, soft footsteps were heard from outside. Nalin Hai roared, "Get lost. All of you get out. I'll break all your legs if you don't get lost. You were the one who lost your legs, and now you're trying to break others' legs, forcing your pain onto others. Do you think that makes you feel better?" Hearing this voice, Naylan Hai's expression immediately changed. His body moved and he hovered in midair. His gaze towards Chu Xiu was filled with shock. He had clearly left, so why was he still here? At this time, Naylan Hai also noticed the movement around him. Something was wrong. There was not a single movement around the entire island, and even the sound of the waves had been muffled. Naylan Hai's legs were indeed crippled, but he had experienced countless battles in his early years. At this moment he understood what Chu Xiu was going to do. Chu Xiu, how dare you? Chu Xiu only sneered. The next moment Buddha's light shone around him, and the Dharma form of the Mahavairokkana seal appeared behind him. The Buddha's seal fell and its power was like a landslide. Naylan Hai's legs were only crippled, which affected part of his combat power. However, his cultivation was still there. At this moment, Naylan Hai formed a seal with his hand, and the endless water vapor around him condensed into a monstrous wave in front of him. It was like a tsunami crashing against the Buddha's seal. But the next moment, the powerful and heavy Buddha's seal completely shattered it. Naylan Hai's figure was blasted into the ground, and the powerful force shook his meridians, causing his face to turn pale. Chu Xiu stepped out, and the Dharma form of the Mahavairokkana seal behind him was majestic and sacred, but the Buddha's seal in his hand fell mercilessly again. Naylan Hai roared angrily, and countless blood mists burst out from the pores of his body, fusing with the water vapor, and turned into countless blood spears that blasted towards Chu Xiu. However, they were still forcibly smashed by the seal. Naylan Hai spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face was as pale as paper. His eyes were full of horror and disbelief. Being overseas, Naylan Hai's knowledge was actually not as good as that of the warriors in the Central Plains. After all, the number of strong warriors overseas was limited, and the area was also limited. Therefore, the strongest person Naylan Hai had ever seen in his life was Kong Dongming, who had crippled his legs. And now he finally saw another person, a person like Kong Dongming, who he did not even have the confidence to resist. The Buddha's seal fell for the third time, and this time Chu Xiu formed the colorless sealing palm seal. The power of this seal distorted the universe and strangled everything. Naylan Hai could not withstand this seal, and was immediately sent flying while vomiting blood. At this moment, a halberd appeared in Chu Xiu's hand, and he displayed the great E-halberd technique. The halberd seemed to be able to shatter mountains and split rivers, and that overbearing power had instantly torn apart Naylan Hai's protective Jin Qi, penetrated his chest and directly nailed him to the ground. This halberd was not a divine weapon. The Heavenly Way war case was severely damaged and could no longer change its form. However, even an ordinary precious weapon could still kill people, and even without a weapon. Chu Xiu only used a weapon to confuse people. This halberd had completely torn apart Naylan Hai's heart. Chu Xiu slowly walked in front of Naylan Hai, and expressionlessly pulled out the halberd. In an instant, Naylan Hai's life force fell to the extreme. Before he died, Naylan Hai pointed at Chu Xiu, but before he could say his last words, his life force completely dissipated. He still had a lot of questions, such as why did Chu Xiu return after leaving, and why did he come to kill him again? Unfortunately, he was destined to never get the answers to these questions. Chu Xiu was also not interested in explaining so much to a dead person. Looking at Naylan Hai's corpse, Chu Xiu turned around and left. At this moment, outside of Naylan Hai's nameless island, a small boat was parked there. However, from the outside they could not see the boat. Countless formations were carved on the boat, and there were even a few formation masters setting up formations below the cabin, hiding the movements on the island from the outside world. On the small boat, Pak Donglai seemed rather nervous. He had been planning to attack Supreme Island for 8 to 10 years and not just a day or two. Now that the plan had finally started, the steps were completely different from what he had imagined. It was no wonder that he was nervous. However, Pak Donglai suppressed his anxiety and took out a chessboard. He said to Yi Buoxuan, "Master Yi, there's no point in just waiting. Why don't we play a game?" Yi Buoxuan shook his head and said, "No thanks. There's not enough time." Pak Donglai was taken aback. "Don't worry, Master Yi. My chess skills are not that bad. I'm not saying that the game will end too quickly. I'm just saying that official Chu will probably be done by the time we started. It can't be that fast, right?" Pak Donglai was still in disbelief. Previously he wanted to go in with Chu Xiu to attack Naylan Hai. However, Chu Xiu said that there was no need for that. The more people there were, the easier it would be to leave traces. Pak Donglai definitely believed that Chu Xiu could win. However, he couldn't believe that Chu Xiu could kill Naylan Hai so quickly. Even if Naylan Hai's legs were crippled, He was still a true spiritual refinement state cultivator. Just as he was still in doubt, Chu Xiu had already landed on the boat. Pak Donglai was shocked. Wuxia shrugged and said, "I told you that there's definitely not enough time. Official Chu has already taken care of that side." Pak Donglai was still in shock. Chu Xiu said faintly, "He's a cripple. If I'm any slower then I'll be a real cripple." "Alright, he's already dead. Go back and wait for news. When Bailey Pobbing is lured out then we'll take care of him." Chu Xiu's idea was not to swarm in and kill randomly. Instead he wanted to kill them one by one. Nayland Hai was the easiest to kill because there was no one else on the entire island except for him. And Bailey Pobbing still had Divine Weapon Island. Although there weren't many people on Divine Weapon Island, there were still many elites who belonged to Bailey Pobbing. If one of them escaped it would be easy for someone to leak the news. Therefore Chu Xiu killed Nayland Hai first. Then he would find a way to lure out Bailey Pobbing and finally take care of him. Pak Donglai rubbed his chin, but he still couldn't hide the shock in his heart. After all, Nayland Hai was one of the top experts in the overseas region. In the end he was squashed to death by Chu Xiu like a chicken. This was already terrifying enough. Of course, the most terrifying thing was that even though Chu Xiu had such power, he was forced by the righteous path of the Central Plains warriors to come to the overseas region to seek reinforcements. One could imagine how deep the waters of the Central Plains were. The boat quietly sailed away. 2 days later, Nayland Hai's corpse was discovered. After all, Nayland Hai was Hua Xingzuan's adopted son. Hearing that he was angry again and chased away the servants, Hua Xingzuan could only send a few disciples of the Hua family to take a look. In the end they actually brought back Nayland Hai's corpse. When the news of Nayland Hai's death spread, the entire Hua Xingzuan's forces were in an uproar. Everyone hurried over to see what was going on. For so many years, no one had ever dared to provoke the Supreme Island. When Hua Xingzuan saw Nayland Hai's corpse, his first reaction wasn't sadness, but panic. Chapter 10:15. Hua Xingzuan was indeed panicking, because the peace he had maintained for so long had been shattered. Ever since he took in these godson, or to be more precise, ever since he obtained the pair of God's eyes, everything had been smooth sailing for him. For so many years he had never suffered a loss. He relied on these foster sons to support his current situation of dominating the Clear Wind Sea region. Hua Xingzuan panicked in the face of such a sudden situation. His usual calm and unperturbed appearance was gone. He even kept pacing around Nayland Hai's corpse, his mouth constantly muttering, "Who the hell is it? Who dared to kill the fourth prince?" Even Bailey Pobbing frowned when he saw Hua Xingzuan's reaction. He coughed and said, "Don't panic, Godfather. We don't have to be afraid of anyone as long as it's not a heaven and earth abstruse realm powerhouse." Bailey Pobbing felt a little sad because he had always had a good relationship with Nayland Hai. Among Hua Xingzuan's godson, he immediately took in Fu Longshao and Nayland Hai as his godson after taking in Bailey Pobbing. When Nayland Hai was young, Bailey Pobbing even gave him pointers on martial arts for a period of time. The two were like teachers and friends. Thus, after Nayland Hai was unable to recover from his setback, he was always gloomy towards him. However, Nayland Hai's attitude towards Bailey Pobbing did not change at all. Hua Xingzuan patted Bailey Pobbing and said, "I'll leave this place to you then. I know that you have a good relationship with the fourth prince. You have to find the murderer as soon as possible and avenge the fourth prince." Bailey Pobbing nodded and began to examine Nayland Hai's corpse. He was not Hua Xingzuan who lived a comfortable life. Instead, he had climbed all the way here, so he was very familiar with these things. Fu Longshao also came to help. Although he didn't have a good relationship with Nayland Hai and Bailey Pobbing, he couldn't care less about scheming at this time. He followed Bailey Pobbing to examine Nayland Hai's body. After a long while, Bailey Pobbing said with a solemn expression, "The person who attacked is very strong. He practically crushed everything in his path. The fourth prince even started to burn his blood essence, but he still couldn't stop him." Fu Longshao also said, "Looking at the wound, the fourth prince should have died under a weapon like halberd. Combined with the opponent's strength, the person who attacked should be at the peak of the true fire spirit refinement realm." Bailey Pobbing frowned and said, "But I didn't detect any kind of vital energy from the fourth prince's body. In the Qingfeng Sea region, who would use halberd as a weapon?" Fu Longshao shook his head and said, "Among the contemporary martial artists, there are some martial artists from the Central Plains who use halberd as a weapon. Especially the generals from the Central Plains who come from the military. A weapon like halberd is definitely a fierce weapon in battle. But in our overseas region, there are still many people who use sabers and swords. Even if there are martial artists who use halberd as a weapon, their strength is definitely not at the true fire spirit refinement realm. Bailey Pobbing suddenly said, "What about the Feng-splitting sea?" Fu Longxiao thought for a moment and said, "There is an expert living in seclusion in the depths of the Feng-splitting sea who uses halberd. But the opponent cultivates black flame gang energy. This kind of gang energy is hot and overbearing. Once he attacks, it is easy to leave traces. But there is no trace of gang energy left on the fourth prince's body. Most importantly, why did he kill the fourth prince? What's the motive?" Bailey Pobbing rubbed his head, feeling a headache coming on. He was also puzzled about the motive. He couldn't figure out why someone would want to kill a guy like Naylan Hai who was already crippled. As for whether Naylan Hai had offended people over the years, there were really many. But he was already living in seclusion on a small island, and the people he really offended were not the big shots with power and influence. They were just some servants who served him. It couldn't be those people who did it, right? At this moment, Hua Xingzuan, who had been watching silently from the side, suddenly said, "Do you guys think it could be Chu Xiu who did it?" Fu Longxiao and Bailey Pobbing looked at each other at the same time and shook their heads. Bailey Pobbing said, "It shouldn't be possible. I've looked into it before. Chu Xiu has long left the Eastern Sea. And according to Chu Xiu's information, this person is skilled in saber techniques. There is even a record of him forcing the abbot of the Great Light Temple, the Heaven and Earth Elemental Enlightenment Realm expert, Su Ci, to retreat with a single saber strike. Although Chu Xiu had used the Black Tortoise True technique outside, he had only used it a few times. It was impossible for the overseas region to have such detailed information. Even in the wind-sweeping tower, one had to look through the most detailed information in order to be mentioned. Fu Longxiao also said, "That's right. It doesn't seem like Chu Xiu's doing because he has no reason to do so. Chu Xiu came to the Eastern Sea to look for reinforcements. So what if he killed the fourth prince? Does he think we'll help him just because one of us died? If it's to vent his anger?" Speaking up to this point, Fu Longxiao secretly glanced at Hua Xingzuan and said, "If it's to vent his anger, he doesn't have to kill the fourth prince. Godfather, many of your direct descendants are in the outside world." Hearing this, some of the direct descendants of the Hua family felt a chill in their hearts. Previously, they were bold enough to do whatever they wanted in the outside world because they were confident that the Hua family in Sovereign Island could protect them. But now that they saw a dead person, they realized that not everyone was afraid of their backing. They even wanted to go out and call their children back. It was too dangerous outside. Sovereign Island was safer. The two searched for a while but they couldn't find anything. They had no choice but to seal Naylan Hai's body. Bailey Pobbing said solemnly, "Godfather, during this period of time recall the Hua family's people. We don't know if the fourth prince died because he offended someone, or if someone is targeting Sovereign Island." He turned to Fu Longxiao and said, "Third brother, don't think about running to the wind-splitting ocean for now. Mobilize your Blue Dragon fleet to look for clues." Fu Longxiao humphed, "Do I need you to tell me that?" After giving the orders, Bailey Pobbing and Fu Longxiao both left. They were going to gather people and look for clues. He didn't believe that no one in that area of the sea had heard the slightest bit of movement when he had killed someone so brazenly. Hua Xingzuan watched the two leave. He wanted to say something but he couldn't say a single word. He didn't know why but he always had a feeling of unease. Of course he wasn't the only one who felt it. Bailey Pobbing felt it too. He seemed to have vaguely sensed something but he couldn't figure out what it was. Driving his ship, Bailey Pobbing returned to Divine Armament Island. Although Bailey Pobbing wasn't good at managing his own forces, he had quite a number of subordinates. Sending them out would be of some use. At that moment, a huge wave suddenly rose on the surface of the ocean. The wave was extremely terrifying. Like a tsunami, it completely capsized Bailey Pobbing's ship in an instant. Bailey Pobbing fell into the water, but the stellar chi around him had already separated the endless seawater. At that moment, Bailey Pobbing suddenly realized something was wrong. His ship was refined using a blacksmithing technique. 80% of the ship was made of metal, and it was also inscribed with countless arrays. It wouldn't be a problem for it to sail through the Windbreaker Sea. Most of the sea in the Windbreaker Sea was calm. How could there be such a huge wave that even capsized his ship? Bailey Pobbing walked on the water and his figure rose to the surface. At that moment his expression suddenly changed. The area within a radius of more than 10 miles had been completely separated by countless water walls. It was like a prison. Even an idiot could guess that he had fallen into an ambush. At that moment, a crack appeared on the water wall. Chu Xiu walked out of it and walked on the water. Bailey Pobbing instantly understood everything the moment he saw Chu Xiu. But he didn't expect this person to be Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu. It's you? Why did you kill the fourth prince? Why did you become enemies with the Venerable Island? Just because we didn't agree to work with you? Just because Godfather wanted to take you in as his godson? Bailey Pobbing understood, but he was confused because it didn't make sense. Chu Xiu couldn't possibly be so narrow-minded that he would kill someone over such a small conflict, right? You really want to know? Bailey Pobbing nodded with a gloomy expression. Go to hell and think about it with your fourth brother. As Chu Xiu's voice fell in the next moment, the scorching true fire of inner energy around him burned, and there was even a black world annihilation fire mixed within it. As the punch landed, a thunderous explosion rang out in the surroundings. The punch suppressed the heavens and earth and crushed the mountains and rivers. Bailey Pobbing roared angrily. Dazzling white astral energy wrapped around his body like a sharp blade. He didn't have a weapon, but his entire body was filled with weapons. The two fists collided. In that instant, a powerful shockwave rippled outwards. With the two of them as the center, an endless whirlpool of waves exploded. The water droplets at the center were even torn into tiny mist. Bailey Pobbing's expression changed. Just like that day at Hua Xingzuan's birthday banquet, he couldn't withstand the power of Chu Xiu's punch. He retreated. The armor on his arm was torn, and Bailey Pobbing's face was pale. However, Chu Xiu was expressionless as he smashed his fist down again. This time it was an extreme strength. One punch after another, Bailey Pobbing's armor, which was comparable to a divine weapon, was completely shattered. He was even vomiting blood from Chu Xiu's punches. With a furious roar, the chi and blood around Bailey Pobbing roared. He controlled the power of heaven and earth around him. As he punched, the endless waves turned into a blood-colored dragon that roared at Chu Xiu. Facing this punch, Chu Xiu still punched with a simple punch. That punch was the only one in the world. Chapter 10:16. Using real fire to refine one's body, one would be able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the world without relying on the world itself. Chu Xiu's punch was the fist intent that Qin Qing Di had once comprehended. It should be said that every warrior who had practiced real fire to refine their body should be able to comprehend the fist intent. However, Chu Xiu was the kind of person who had mastered it in a short period of time. Therefore, this punch, which did not rely on the world and completely exerted his own strength to the extreme, was only comprehended by Chu Xiu now. Among those of the same level, when it came to physical cultivation, Chu Xiu was invincible except for Qin Qing Di. The blood-colored water dragon was smashed, and the boundless blood chi was completely smashed by the power of this punch, turning into a blood mist that drifted around. Bailey Pobbing had a complicated expression on his face. From the moment Chu Xiu blasted out this punch, he knew that he had lost. The power of this punch was not something he could resist. It could even be said that the power of this punch was the ultimate power that he had always pursued. However, fate made a fool out of him. He had never imagined that he would die under such a punch. When Chu Xiu's punch fell, Bailey Pobbing instantly felt a strong force pouring into his body. In an instant, his eyes were covered by a blood-red color, and in the blink of an eye, he was no longer breathing. Chu Xiu's punch had shattered all the defenses of his body, and even his bones had been smashed. At this time, under the sea, Bailey Pobbing's boat had floated up, but all the people on the boat had been buried at the bottom of the sea. Because of the formation, the wind and waves under the sea were not ordinary. Apart from Bailey Pobbing, who had cultivated real fire to the spiritual refinement realm, no one could walk on the water in such an environment. Casually throwing Bailey Pobbing's body onto the deck, Chu Xiu walked out of the water curtain magic array. Pak Donglai's boat was already waiting for him there. Seeing that Chu Xiu had dealt with Bailey Pobbing so quickly this time, Pak Donglai was also surprised. However, with the incident with Nayland Hai as a foundation, he was able to withstand it. Official Chu, are you looking for an opportunity to get rid of Fu Longxiao? Chu Xiu nodded and said, it would be best if we can get rid of Fu Longxiao. However, 2 people had died in a row. Even if Fu Longxiao was an idiot, he would be able to guess that we were coming for him. He probably didn't have a chance. But it doesn't matter. With our current strength, it won't be a problem for us to attack Sovereign Island. Pak Donglai nodded. He was really convinced now. After getting rid of 2 of Hua Xingzuan's foster sons in one go, their plan was almost in the bag this time. On the second day, Bailey Pobbing's boat and corpse were found. The sea they stopped at wasn't considered remote, and there were many boats coming and going. Bailey Pobbing's steel boat was very famous in the breezy ocean. Everyone was a little confused when they saw his boat parked there motionlessly. But when they saw Bailey Pobbing's corpse, they were in an uproar. The entire breezy ocean was instantly in an uproar. When Nayland Hai died, most people didn't know about it. After all, Nayland Hai's corpse was found by the whole family. But this time Bailey Pobbing's corpse was found by others. Someone even spread the news that Nayland Hai was dead too. Now the entire breezy ocean was in a state of panic. Someone seemed to have realized that this was targeting the fifth Lord Hua. The entire breezy ocean was showing signs of changing. Currently on Sovereign Island, Hua Xingzuan and Fu Longxiao looked at Bailey Pobbing's corpse on the ground and felt chills down their spines. Yesterday Bailey Pobbing was still inspecting Nayland Hai's corpse with them. But today he was already a corpse. Who could take such a blow? What's going on? What's going on? Hua Xingzuan was about to go crazy. His life had been too smooth sailing. Ever since he obtained the pair of god eyes, all he had to do was to place his bets and follow his superiors who had a promising future. When he had a certain level of influence, he started to nurture his foster sons such as Qiu Tianya. All the fights and battles were handled by his foster sons, and he was only responsible for reaping the fruits of their labor. As a senior who was almost 400 years old, the setbacks and hardships he had experienced couldn't even be compared to a lone cultivator who had been in the pugilistic world for a few years. Having a smooth sailing life wasn't a good thing. It was better to suffer early. If he didn't experience any setbacks and hardships when he was young, he would be scared to death by the pressure when he was old. Compared to Hua Xingzuan, Fu Longxiao was much calmer. In the Fenghai Ocean he could still rely on Hua Xingzuan's influence. But in the Fenghai Ocean he had to rely on his own strength to survive. Hua Xingzuan said in a deep voice, "Godfather, we can be sure now. These people are here for our Venerable Islands branch. And they're definitely not alone. No matter how strong a person is, even if he could kill second brother and the fourth prince, he couldn't have done it without making a sound. The fourth prince was killed by halberd, while second brother's bones were crushed by absolute strength in his area of expertise. In other words, the other party had at least two powerful cultivators and a powerful force helping them to cover their tracks." Hua Xingzuan was completely panicking. Who is it that wants to go against us? When have I offended such a powerful cultivator in all these years? Sigh, if only I had known earlier, I would have found a fortune teller for this birthday. It's an unlucky year. Fu Longxiao frowned. At this moment he suddenly felt that his godfather was only SOSO. Previously, Hua Xingzuan's name as the god of eyes had spread far and wide. When Fu Longxiao learned that he was Hua Xingzuan's godson, he was overjoyed and thought that he could finally make a name for himself. However, he neglected one point. He was able to achieve what he had today not because he was Hua Xingzuan's godson. Instead, it was their achievements that made Hua Xingzuan who he was today. However, Hua Xingzuan was simply too calm in the past. He was so calm that it was as if everything was under his control. But now, Hua Xingzuan's attitude made Fu Longxiao a little uncomfortable. He coughed and said, "Godfather, the enemy is in the dark while we're out in the open. Everything will be fine as long as we defend Supreme Island." Before Hua Xingzuan could say anything, a servant suddenly came to report, "Master, Tianyishui Hall's pavilion Lord Pak Donglai, Stormy Waves Alliance's leader Ko Shentong, and Cetacean Society's leader Long Tianying are here to visit." "What are they here for?" Fu Longxiao frowned. "They should be here to pay their respects after learning of second brother's death," Hua Xingzuan replied after thinking for a while. "They've been rather obedient all these years, especially Long Tianying. He gave many of his businesses in Cetacean Society to my Hua family." Fu Longxiao twitched his mouth. Long Tianying didn't give them those businesses, but the Hua family snatched them away. "Godfather, don't be careless. None of them are easy to get along with. Ko Shentong has a grudge against second brother. It's already good enough that he didn't set off firecrackers to celebrate second brother's death. Why would he come to pay his respects? As for that Pak Donglai, don't be fooled by his forthright appearance. He's actually a scheming person, and he's good at hiding a dagger behind his smile. It's best to be careful." "It can't be, right?" Hua Xingzuan was confused. "Pak Donglai has been very obedient all these years. Every birthday celebration he would give the most expensive present apart from the two of you." Hua Xingzuan believed in his own judgment, but he forgot that he could only see a person's future achievements. He couldn't see a person's true thoughts. Fu Longxiao smiled bitterly in his heart. This was the problem. "Pak Donglai isn't even your godson. Why does he have to give me such good things every time?" With his guard up, Fu Longxiao followed behind Hua Xingzuan and walked out together. In the main hall, Pak Donglai and the other two were there. Seeing Hua Xingzuan and the other two walking out, Pak Donglai quickly stood up and said, "Fifth Lord, I heard something happened to Bailey Island's Lord." "What happened?" Hua Xingzuan's face was gloomy. He waved his hand and said, "I'm afraid someone saw that I've been controlling Donghai for too long, so they want to jump out and cause trouble. By the way, why did the three of you come this time?" Pak Donglai took a step forward and said, "We heard something happened to Bailey Island's Lord, so we wanted to take a look and offer our condolences. Also, I have a piece of news that I want to tell you, Fifth Lord." "What news?" Pak Donglai took another step forward and said, "Our Tianyishui Hall often has fleets that purchase all kinds of resources coming and going from various seas. When Bailey Island's Lord was killed, one of our Tianyishui Hall's fleets happened to pass by not far from where Bailey Island's Lord was killed, and they noticed something." Hua Xingzuan immediately went forward and said, "Oh? What did you find?" Pak Donglai said in a deep voice, "We found out that the people who killed Bailey Pobing are us." As soon as he said that, Pak Donglai's expression instantly became extremely ferocious. A small crimson sword had appeared in his hand without anyone noticing. The small sword was only the length of a forearm, but it seemed to be made of magma. It was so hot that it was distorting the surrounding space. "Old fart, you know that you've controlled East Sea for too long. Since that's the case, you should be prepared to give up your position." The next moment, the crimson sword had already broken through the space, easily tearing apart Hua Xingzuan's protective aura, and the next moment, it would completely pierce into his chest. Even Fu Longshao couldn't react in time. Fu Longshao was in charge of the Blue Dragon fleet, so he was naturally quite knowledgeable. Therefore he could tell at a glance, just like Chu Xiu, that Pak Donglai was a schemer. He was definitely a smiling tiger, unlike how he appeared to be submissive on the surface. However, he didn't expect Pak Donglai to have the intention to kill Hua Xingzuan. He actually dared to do it on Paragon Island. When they were guessing who the murderer was, they didn't expect Pak Donglai to be one of them. It was too late to stop the attack. However, a pill suddenly appeared in front of Hua Xingzuan. That pill seemed to be made of gold and iron. Countless extremely sharp and resplendent sword chi burst out from it, and in an instant, it had already completely strangled the crimson sword. Chapter 10:17. Pak Donglai's sudden assassination had already caused Hua Xingzuan to break out in cold sweat. For Hua Xingzuan, who had lived like a prince for over 100 years, even if he were to fight with Pak Donglai one-on-one, he wouldn't be a match for Pak Donglai, let alone this kind of sudden assassination. Fortunately, he still had a trump card, which was the pill he had on him. This was the sword pill that Qiu Tianya had given to Hua Xingzuan. A sword pill that was formed by gathering boundless sword chi in one's dantian was a method used by some sword grandmasters in ancient times. When facing an enemy, a sword pill would be spat out from one's dantian, and boundless sword chi would be released. The killing power would be abnormally shocking. However, in the later stages, this method was abandoned because it was too time-consuming. Condensing a sword pellet could easily take years as the unit of measurement. 1 to 2 years was considered fast. Usually, it would take several years to successfully condense a sword pill. Furthermore, once the sword pill was damaged, not only would several years of effort be wasted, one's vitality would also be damaged. Compared to this, the increase in combat power was obviously not worth it. Therefore, in the later stages, the sword pill was gradually eliminated as a method of sword cultivation. In the past, no one knew where Qiu Tianya had obtained the cultivation method for the sword pill. He didn't plan to use it himself, but he had given it to Hua Xingzuan as a protective treasure. His talent in swordsmanship could be said to be unparalleled. Others had spent several years to successfully condense the sword pill, but he had only spent 1 year to condense it. Moreover, he had risked damaging his own vitality to separate it from his body and hand it over to Hua Xingzuan so that he could save his life. He had never thought that it would really come in handy today. Looking at the flashing sword chi on the sword pill, Hua Xingzuan breathed heavily. He looked at Pak Donglai and with lingering fear he shouted angrily, "Pak Donglai! You actually dared to kill I, are you courting death? Fine. Today I will fulfill your wish. Not only will you die but everyone in Tianyishui Hall will also be executed." Hua Xingzuan shouted crazily, but Fu Longshao didn't seem to be excited. In fact, he even felt a trace of uneasiness. Pak Donglai was simply too calm, so calm that it was as if his assassination had not failed. What else did he have to rely on? Very soon Fu Longshao found out. When Chu Xiu and Yi Buoxuan stepped into the hall, he clicked his tongue and shook his head. "Mr. Bo, I told you this move of yours is useless." Hua Xingzuan has been in the breezy sea for so many years, and there must be more than one person who wants his life. There must be more than one person who has used assassination methods. Yet he is still alive and well. How could he not have a trump card? Pak Donglai smiled and said, "There's nothing wrong with trying. If we can kill him, it will save us a lot of effort." At this moment, whether it was Hua Xingzuan or Fu Longxiao, they all looked at Chu Xiu in shock. At the same time, their eyes flashed with intense disbelief. Chu Xiu had clearly left, so when did he return? Hua Xingzuan pointed at Chu Xiu, his finger even trembling, and said, "You killed second brother and the fourth prince? What? Just because I didn't agree to attack Eastern Qi back then? You want to wipe out Paragon Island? Chu Xiu, you are so ruthless. What a vicious move." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Of course that's part of the reason, but there's another reason. You want to be my father, and that makes me very unhappy. Of course, if you know how my last father died, you will feel very comforted. Those who want to be my father usually end up in a rather miserable state." Hua Xingzuan's eyes widened. He never expected Chu Xiu to come for revenge for such a ridiculous reason. He had adopted a son for so many years, and it wasn't as if he had never failed. For example, he once told Kang Dongming that he wanted to adopt him as his son, but Kang Dongming didn't agree, so he let it go. Why did it lead to a massacre this time? Chu Xiu suddenly laughed and said, "I'm just joking. Chu Xiu, I'm not that narrow-minded. Everyone in the Central Plains Warriors knows that Chu Xiu is famous for being broad-minded. But Fifth Lord Hua, since you don't want to help me, I have to find another way out. I'm very satisfied with Mr. Bo's offer, and I can also fulfill his offer, which is to wipe out Paragon Island." Hua Xingzuan gritted his teeth and said, "You betrayed us and killed Pak Donglai. I promise you that I will gather all the forces in the breezy ocean to help you attack Eastern Qi." Hearing this, everyone, including Fu Longxiao, couldn't help but look at Hua Xingzuan. Chu Xiu was stunned for a moment, then he laughed and said, "Fifth Lord Hua, you're already a few hundred years old. Can you not be so naive? You've already killed half of your people, and you've even unsheathed your sword. Is it possible for you to take it back now? What's done can't be taken back, and what's done can't be disobeyed. Today it's your fate to die." Perhaps it was because Hua Xingzuan realized that he had reached a dead end, he was no longer as terrified and panicky as before. He said coldly, "Do you really think it's that easy to kill I?" Fu Longxiao's nerves were stretched to the limit, and he was ready to escape at any time. That's right, he was going to escape by himself. He had no intention of bringing Hua Xingzuan along. He had repaid Hua Xingzuan with enough things over the years. He didn't want to wait here and die with Hua Xingzuan. Chu Xiu, Yi Buxuan, Pak Donglai, and Ko Shintong. 4 true fire spirit refinement state cultivators were more than enough to attack Supremacy Island. This was especially so for Chu Xiu. He alone was more terrifying than the remaining 3 people combined. What could they use to fight? How could they continue fighting? Pak Donglai and Ko Shintong each took out a cylindrical object. They moved it lightly, and light pierced through the houses and shot into the sky. The fleets from Tianyishui Hall and the Stormy Tide Alliance that were lying in ambush were rushing over from all directions, ready to destroy Sovereign Island. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Sword pellet? This thing is quite interesting. Leave it to me. The 3 of you don't let Fu Longxiao escape." The expressions of everyone present were extremely relaxed. Things were almost in the bag now that things had developed to this point. Ko Shintong had a huge grudge against Sovereign Island's Hua family, so he charged towards Fu Longxiao with earth energy. Yi Buxuan and Pak Donglai walked to the back slowly, blocking any way that Fu Longxiao could dodge. Just as Fu Longxiao was about to fight to the death, Hua Xingzuan waved his hand as fast as he could. Blood splattered as he drew runes in the air. His speed was so fast that it was as if he had practiced it countless times. Chu Xiu punched out, but the sword pellet released an extremely sharp sword energy. The power within it was actually able to clash head-on with Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu didn't take a single step back. In that moment of delay, the entire Sovereign Island started shaking. It was as if an earth dragon was turning over. Pak Donglai suddenly thought of something. He shouted, "Quick, get rid of Fu Longxiao." As soon as his voice fell, he saw countless arrows shining with the 5 elements Gang Qi exploding toward them. The energy on the arrows was the purest energy of heaven and earth. They also contained extremely pure power. Moreover, the arrowheads of the arrows were made with the material of divine weapons. Even Pak Donglai and the others wouldn't be able to withstand it for a long time. Just then the 5th Lord Hua shouted, "Ing! Quick attack! Kill him!" As soon as the 5th Lord Hua shouted, An arrow immediately shot towards Chu Xiu. However, the moment he saw the arrow, Chu Xiu's expression changed. It wasn't because the arrow was too strong. Instead, it was because Chu Xiu was too familiar with it. The pitch-black arrow was infused with the power of nirvanic extermination. It was actually the Triple City Destruction arrow. The flames around Chu Xiu burned intensely. He punched out and collided with the Triple City Destroying arrow. With a loud bang, the flames of destruction immediately detonated the destructive power. In the past, Chu Xiu had always used this arrow to deal with others. However, when it was his turn to bear the power, he finally realized how overbearing the power of the Triple City Destroying arrow was. One could only use pure power to counteract it. No other method could completely dissolve the destructive power. Just then, Chu Xiu also saw the appearance of the person who shot the Triple City Destroying arrow. It was a tall, thin man dressed in a black robe from head to toe. Half of his face was covered by a black veil as he stood in a dark corner. However, his powerful demonic aura attracted everyone's attention, including Fu Longxiao. Although he had vaguely heard that his adoptive father seemed to have an adopted son protecting him in secret, this was the first time he had seen this person in person. His attack was so powerful that it was shocking. The man in black was the adopted son of the Fifth Lord Hua, but he was also not. He was the shadow of the Fifth Lord Hua, the shadow that had always been hiding in the dark. The other adopted sons had been found by Hua Xingzuan on his own initiative. Only Ying had been accidentally rescued by Hua Xingzuan. At that time, Ying was drifting on the sea and was rescued by Hua Xingzuan. However, Ying was already severely injured and did not even have long to live. Hua Xingzuan could see the light on his body flickering. It was obvious that he would become an expert in the future if he could survive. If he couldn't, there was nothing more to say. Although Hua Xingzuan had gathered many famous doctors to treat him, Ying's injuries still could not be healed. He had to ensure that he slept for a long time every day to preserve his lifespan. Therefore, he took the initiative to hibernate under the Supreme Island. From then on, he would protect the entire Supreme Island as Hua Xingzuan's shadow. Only Hua Xingzuan alone could wake him up with a secret technique. Every time Ying attacked, it would consume his little lifespan. All these years, everything had been smooth sailing for Hua Xingzuan. Even though he had some enemies, none of them could threaten his life. He did not expect to encounter a life-or-death situation when he used Ying's trump card for the first time. However, Chu Xiu did not care about Hua Xingzuan. Instead, he stared at Ying and asked, "Where did you get your Triple City Destroying arrow?" Chapter 10:18. The Triple City Extinguishing Arrow, which was Dugu Weiwei's strongest killing move in the past, was now in the hands of an outsider. This made Chu Xiu very surprised and even horrified. Wei Shuya had already said that Dugu Weiwei's inheritance was very little. The Triple City Extinguishing Arrow was left behind by Dugu Weiwei in the illusion. As for the remaining martial techniques or powers related to Dugu Weiwei, it could be said that Chu Xiu had obtained them through various coincidences. In the end, someone had used the Triple Link City Destruction arrow overseas. How could Chu Xiu not be astonished? That was because this involved a single matter. That was whether or not they had found Dugu Weiwei's corpse. Whether Dugu Weiwei was dead or alive was important to others, but it was more important to Chu Xiu. This was related to who Chu Xiu was. At this moment, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered with Hua Xingzuan anymore. He only wanted to know from Ying where he obtained the Triple City Extinguishing arrow. At this moment, Hua Xingzuan shouted, "Ying! Kill him! Kill this bastard!" Although it was Hua Xingzuan who had saved Ying's life, even Hua Xingzuan could not figure out his background. He only needed to know that Ying was willing to be his shadow for life to repay him for saving his life. That was enough. At this moment, the outside world stopped shaking. The ground cracked open and mechanical puppets made of metal walked out of the ground. There were more than 100 of them. Some of these mechanical puppets were holding bows and arrows, while others were holding sabers and spears. The arrows containing the pure power of the 5 elements that had been shot at them earlier had been shot by these mechanical puppets. Pak Donglai's expression changed. It's the Prophecy Island. The predecessor of the Supreme Island is actually the Prophecy Island. Previously, Pak Donglai suspected that there was something strange about the Supreme Island itself. Now it seemed that the strangeness was huge. The Prophecy Island was a big island in the ancient times. It monopolized all resources and utilized the mechanical puppets to the extreme. The puppets made with divine weapon materials could even fight against real fire spirit refinement state. Later on, it was rumored that the Prophecy Island fell into the eye of the sea. Now it seemed that the Prophecy Island was clearly obtained by Hua Xingzuan. He used some means to disguise it and turned it into the current Supreme Island. These mechanical puppets on the Heavenly Fortune Island could still be used. In a one-on-one fight, these things couldn't even defeat a real pellet state martial artist, but at this time hundreds of mechanical puppets attacked together. The power could already threaten the existence of real fire spirit refinement state. Do you really think that after so many years, I don't have any trump cards and can only be slaughtered by you? These years, I have asked people to repair nearly half of the mechanical puppets. They are indeed the products of the Prophecy Island. The power of each mechanical puppet is comparable to the real pellet state. With hundreds of mechanical puppets, even if the existence of the heaven and earth mystic state comes, I will not be afraid. Looking at those mechanical puppets, Pak Dong Lai gritted his teeth and said, "For so many years, people have offered some materials for forging divine weapons and things like spirit stones. Even if you can't use them, you still accept them all. Now it seems that you are simply using the birthday celebration to collect the materials to rebuild these prophecy sex puppets." Huo Xingzuan touched the beard on his chin and said proudly, "You only thought of it now? It's too late. The materials and spirit stones in these puppets might have been offered by you." In fact, Huo Xingzuan was just talking to his heart's content. He wasn't as scheming as Pak Dong Lai thought. Huo Xingzuan liked to celebrate his birthday because he liked to show off. However, after many birthday celebrations, he had accumulated all kinds of materials in his hands, and he couldn't use them. So he remembered that there seemed to be a pile of scrap metal buried under his island. He tried to get someone to repair it, and he didn't expect it to be successfully repaired. "All of you attack." As Huo Xingzuan's voice fell, those mechanical puppets all rushed toward Pak Dong Lai and others crazily. The strength of these mechanical puppets was indeed not good, but ants could bite an elephant to death. With so many mechanical puppets rushing together, it was not so easy to deal with. At this time, Chu Xiu had already begun to fight with the mysterious shadow. The other party was definitely a demonic cultivator. To be precise, all his inheritance came from the Kunlun devil cult. The aura of the other party and the martial arts he used were definitely the standard inheritors of the Kunlun devil cult. Compared to Chu Xiu, he was even more like a demonic cultivator than Chu Xiu. As Chu Xiu fought, he said, "How on earth did you get your cultivation? What is your relationship with the Kunlun devil cult? Do you know who I am? I am the person who is in charge of the remnants of the Kunlun devil cult." Chu Xiu said so much, but the shadow seemed to not hear him. When he attacked, he was still extremely fierce and didn't hold back at all. Seeing this, Chu Xiu's eyes also showed a hint of coldness. Since he couldn't get an answer out of him, he would capture him first and then slowly interrogate him. Anyway, there were countless ways to torture him. At this moment, Chu Xiu no longer held back. The power of the heart demon began to suppress the power of the evil moon blade. As the slash descended with dense demonic energy, the blood moon in the sky twisted and devoured everything around it. But at this moment, the surging demonic aura around Obscurus condensed. As his palm fell, the giant demonic aura in the air seemed to tear the world apart. It directly grasped the blood moon in its hand and smashed it to the ground. Heavenly Demon Palm. Chu Xiu's eyes suddenly shrank. What the other party used was the Heavenly Demon Palm, an early martial art of Dugu Weiwei. In the primitive demon cave, Dugu Weiwei had once used this palm to smash the evil giant tree with human heads, leaving behind traces of the Heavenly Demon Palm. Chu Xiu saw it very clearly. He was absolutely not mistaken. But according to Lu Jianghe, Dugu Weiwei's Heavenly Demon Palm was only a martial art used by Dugu Weiwei in the early days. He only taught it to the heartless demon venerable. It should be impossible for others to use it. Now that Shadow had even used the Heavenly Demon Palm, it was obvious that he had a deep relationship with the Kunlun devil cult. Chu Xiu snorted coldly and the evil moon blade fell again. The void froze and time and space stagnated. The misty slash fell, instantly splitting everything in front of it and went straight for Shadow. The demon energy around Shadow surged. The powerful demon energy affected the surrounding power, forming a huge demon energy vortex. It directly tore the roof above. But under the power of Chu Xiu's misty slash, the demon energy vortex was forcibly torn apart, and the violent demon energy scattered in all directions. In the next moment, Chu Xiu's Devil Buddha Dharma avatar appeared around him. Half of the Mahavirokana Dharma avatar formed the colorless sealing palm imprint, and the other half of the Mahakala Heavenly Devil Dharma avatar appeared in the third eye on its head. Countless pitch-black flames of apocalypse gushed out and shrouded Ing. The Buddhist light suppressed and the world-extinguishing flames attacked. Under this kind of power, Shadow was directly wrapped in it, and his aura was suppressed to the extreme. Just as Chu Xiu was ready to take him down, the aura around Shadow became weaker and weaker. When that aura reached the extreme, a towering demon energy suddenly erupted. A demonic shadow appeared behind him. It was hazy and indistinct like an ancient demon god. The strangest thing was that there was a pitch-black hole on the demon god's chest. It seemed to be boundless. As the demon god Shadow performed a hand seal, countless world-extinguishing flames were instantly enveloped and absorbed by the black hole on his chest. Shadow let out a long breath and his aura became even weaker. When it came to power, there were really not many people in the world who were qualified to compare with Chu Xiu. It was the same for him. A demonic chi longbow condensed, and the Triple City Annihilation arrow shot out explosively towards Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's eyes narrowed. Triple City Extinguishing Arrow? You're too weak. As Chu Xiu's voice fell, he also shot the Triple City Extinguishing Arrow in his hand. But the difference was that Shadow only shot one arrow, while Chu Xiu shot 3 arrows in a row. The first arrow destroyed both of them, but the second and third arrows followed closely. The demon god Shadow behind Shadow seemed to embrace the heaven and earth, hugging the 2 arrows in its chest. In an instant, the 2 arrows were swallowed, and the demon god Shadow completely exploded and melted. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Surrender. You also saw that I know the martial arts techniques that you know and I know the ones that you don't. In terms of power, you're too weak. If you continue to fight, you'll just die. Don't force me to kill you." As an existence in the true fire spiritual refinement realm, Shadow certainly knew the gap between him and Chu Xiu. But he seemed not to be afraid of this emotion. His whole body was still surging with hot demon energy, and he attacked Chu Xiu wildly. Chu Xiu frowned. It was easy to kill him, but if he killed him, where could he go to get clues? He said to the inner demon in his mind, "I'll leave this guy to you. Later, find a chance to enter his heart and build an illusion. Dig out all the secrets in his heart for me." This time, the inner demon hesitated and said, "I'll try my best." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Last time when you dealt with Kuang Shiyue, didn't you easily dig out the deepest pain in his heart?" The inner demon made a helpless expression and said, "You humans are the most complicated existence. The strength of the state of mind is not based on personal strength, but on one's heart. For a person with a strong state of mind, even if he is just an ordinary person, I can't do anything to him. But for a person with a weak state of mind or someone with obvious flaws, even if he is in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, he will be unable to extricate himself. Last time, the flaw in Kuang Shiyue's state of mind was too big, so big that it could affect his performance. Looking at this guy's performance, I can tell that he is definitely a person with an extremely tough state of mind. I'm not sure if I can succeed." "You must succeed. Otherwise, why would I keep a useless person by my side? Why don't I throw him to Master Yuan Ji and the others to study slowly?" After saying that, Chu Xiu didn't care about the inner demon's protest and rushed towards Obscurus. Although the inner demon secretly cursed Chu Xiu for being shameless, he had to prepare to attack at any time. He was not a human, but he understood the human heart better than anyone else. What Chu Xiu said was not a threat. He could really do such a thing. Chapter 10:19. Chu Xiu's strength was much stronger than that of Obscurus. If Chu Xiu really wanted to kill him, a single saber intent of the shattering technique would be enough to slice him into 2. However, compared to Hua Xingzuan and the messy fights in the East Sea, the news about Dugu Weiwei was more important. It could be said that this was the only time that Chu Xiu was serious since he came to the East Sea. Putting away the evil moon blade, Chu Xiu's body was surrounded by Buddha's light. The Mahavarokana made a Buddhist seal and suppressed Obscurus with a strong and overbearing Buddhist power. Obscurus kept struggling as if he was not afraid of death. He desperately tried to kill Chu Xiu. But at this moment, the power of the heart demon had already penetrated into Obscurus's body during the fight. For a moment, Obscurus was stunned. He touched his head and seemed to remember many things. He did not belong to the Breezy Sea, but was a member of the Fenghai Sea. He was one of the few rogue cultivators in the Fenghai Sea. In a tsunami, the ship that he and a few of his best friends were on was completely destroyed. They used all their strength to walk on the water. Although they rushed out of the tsunami, they lost their way. On an island that was not marked on the sea map, they found a cave that was emitting devil chi. The group of people entered the cave, accompanied by devil chi, killing, and all kinds of evil powers. They fell one after another. Finally, he saw what was inside. There were 2 corpses sitting on bronze thrones. Although they were dead, the devil chi was so turbulent that it was frightening. He seemed to have taken something from there and triggered something else. The memory was very vague, leaving him only fear, the great fear of life and death. In the end, he didn't even know how he escaped from that place. He forgot a lot of things. He forgot his own name. He forgot everything. The only thing he couldn't forget was the things he took out from that place. He had forgotten all the martial arts that he had cultivated in the past, but he had learned the martial arts that he had taken out from that place. However, the price he had to pay was that he had reversed the demonic arts and entered a state of complete chi deviation. He was just one step away from being annihilated. Later on he was saved by Huoxingzuan. He did not know who the person who saved him was, but he seemed to remember that when he was very young, there was a person called Shifu who told him that the kindness of a drop of water should be returned with a gushing spring. He felt that this sentence was very funny, but he only remembered this sentence, so he decided to do as it said. From then on he became Ying, the final trump card of Huoxingzuan, the Ying that protected him. That hazy feeling completely dissipated. In the next moment, the evil moon blade slashed down with a soaring demonic energy. Shadow subconsciously tried to block it, but the twisted red moon had already shattered his protective true energy. The evil moon blade pierced straight into his chest. You don't even have your memories anymore. Right now you're nothing more than a walking corpse. Killing you is also a form of release for you. The long blade was pulled out and Shadow's body crashed to the ground. There was no pain or hatred in his eyes, and of course there was no release, because the current him no longer knew what the concept of death was. The heart demon did not dig out all the memories of the other party, only some memory fragments. However, these things were enough to piece together a complete sequence of events. This person was a rogue cultivator from the Windbreaker Sea. He and a group of brothers and friends encountered a tsunami, and accidentally arrived on an island, and found the ruins of a devil's den. In the ruins many of them died, and in the end only he survived. He also brought out something similar to a cultivation method, but he was seriously injured, causing him to lose all his memories. Instead, he went to cultivate the cultivation method he took out from the devil's den, but it led to chi deviation, and he was seriously injured. However, this time he was lucky and he was saved by Huoxingzuan and became his shadow. No wonder this thing looked so strange, as if he had no feelings at all. In fact, he had no feelings at all. When a person lost all his memories, would he still be the person he was? Perhaps in the eyes of others, as long as he had a body, he would be. But to him he was actually already dead. However, the only pity was that his memory fragments were too fragmented, and some key scenes could not be seen clearly at all. For example, the two corpses sitting on the bronze thrones. He could not see their faces at all. Previously, Chu Xiu thought that one of the corpses was Dugu Weiwei, but after thinking about it carefully he felt that something was wrong. If it was Dugu Weiwei, then the other person should be Ning Xuanji. However, in Ying's memory fragments, both of them were exuding devil qi. But these were not important anymore. He had already found the general location of that place in his memory fragments. When things here were settled, he would definitely go there personally. But for now he had to get rid of Huoxingzuan first. At that moment, when Huoxingzuan saw that Chu Xiu had actually killed Ying, he really panicked. Those mechanical puppets of the Heaven Secret sect were his trump cards, and Ying was even more so. But now, one of his trump cards was already dead, and the other one would not last long. Those mechanical puppets were powered by extremely precious spirit stones. Once the spirit stones were used up, they would immediately become a pile of scrap metal. In terms of endurance, an existence at the true fire spirit refinement stage was definitely much better than a pile of scrap metal. Looking at Huoxingzuan's appearance, Chu Xiu could not help but shake his head. This person was already crippled. Relying on his pair of divine eyes, Huoxingzuan had always relied on others for his entire life. How many years had it been since he last fought with others? To be precise, he could count the number of times he had fought with others since he was young. Just now, everyone was fighting fiercely. No matter what, Huoxingzuan was at the true fire spirit refinement stage, but he actually did not help Ying or Fu Longxiao. In his heart, there was no concept of fighting with others. The path of martial arts was the path of war and killing. A martial artist who had even forgotten how to kill was not trash. What was he? Seeing that Chu Xiu's saber was coming towards him, Huoxingzuan shouted and immediately sent the sword ball in his hand forward. This sword ball was given to Huoxingzuan by Qiu Qinya to protect his life, and its power was indeed somewhat beyond imagination. After all, it was refined by an expert in the path of the sword for a year. However, no matter how powerful the sword ball was, it was still a dead object without sentience. In other words, even Qiu Qinya did not expect that his godfather would actually provoke an expert of Chu Xiu's level. Boundless apocalyptic flames were released, directly wrapping around the sword ball. In an instant, tens of thousands of sword chi from the sword ball shot out at the same time, strangling the apocalyptic flames. The apocalyptic flames were extremely sticky, and once the sword ball was entangled, it could not escape for a while. The next moment, the evil moon blade in Chu Xiu's hand slashed down, heading straight for Hua Xingzuan. In a panic, Hua Xingzuan's earth energy exploded from his body, but it was chaotic and disorderly. Even Chu Xiu did not know what he was trying to do. After so many years, he couldn't have really forgotten how to fight with others, right? However, all of this was no longer important. The crimson evil moon twisted all the power, and the evil moon blade easily pierced through Hua Xingzuan's entire body. Instantly, a large amount of blood spewed out of his mouth. I've said it before, those who want to be my father have never had a good ending. Evil moon blade was pulled out, and Hua Xingzuan's corpse was thrown to the side. At this moment, all the mechanical puppets present froze in place, and some even exploded. Back when he was repairing these mechanical puppets, Hua Xingzuan still had some tricks up his sleeves. These mechanical puppets could only be controlled by his imprint and blood. But now that he was dead, the imprint was naturally broken. These mechanical puppets had all lost their effectiveness. Fu Longxiao's expression changed, but it was already too late. Pak Donglai, Ko Shintong, and Yi Buishuan attacked together. With the sudden explosion, Fu Longxiao did not even have the time to burn his blood essence before he was killed on the spot. The important figures on Supreme Island were all dead. What was left were the useless martial artists from the Hua family. Pak Donglai was still in a daze. His plan actually succeeded just like that? After being stunned for a while, Pak Donglai then cupped his hands respectfully towards Chu Xiu and said, "If it wasn't for official Chu, not only would we not have been able to kill Hua Xingzuan, we would probably have to stay there." Official Chu definitely played a huge role in this success. This time, Pak Donglai admitted that he had really underestimated Hua Xingzuan. Although he had expected that Hua Xingzuan would definitely have some trump cards in his hands since he had been an honorable in the breezy ocean for such a long time, he did not expect the trump card to be so powerful. The mysterious man in black was actually able to fight with Chu Xiu for such a long time. His abilities could be said to be rather terrifying. After all, when Chu Xiu killed Nalen Hai and Bailey Pobbing back then, he did not even use a few moves. Actually, Pak Donglai had misunderstood this point. Although Ing was slightly more powerful than Nalen Hai and Bailey Pobbing, he was not as powerful as he had imagined. It was not difficult for Chu Xiu to kill him. However, in the beginning, Chu Xiu wanted to capture him alive and interrogate him for information, so he did not kill him. If Chu Xiu really wanted to kill him, Ing would not be able to resist Chu Xiu for such a long time. "Mr. Bo, there's no need to be so courteous. We each get what we need. As long as Mr. Bo does not forget our promise, it will be fine," Chu Xiu said calmly. Pak Donglai quickly said, "Official Chu, don't worry. I will deal with this as soon as I deal with the remaining members of Sovereign Island." After witnessing Chu Xiu's abilities, Pak Donglai did not have the slightest intention of going back on his word. Moreover, he did not have the right to go back on his word. Although they had killed Hua Xingzuan and the martial artists of Sovereign Island, it did not mean that Pak Donglai could become the most powerful person in the breezy ocean. There was no longer a huge mountain above him, but there would still be many small mountains. Right now, he, Ko Shintong, and the others were the strongest cultivators of the breezy sea. Only when they joined forces would their words be effective. Otherwise, they would still be fighting on their own like a pile of loose sand. Chapter 1020. The complete annihilation of Sovereign Island caused a huge uproar in the entire East Sea. In any place, it was not easy to overthrow a force that had ruled for more than 100 years, as it had already become a habit. Now, this inertia had been broken, and the entire East Sea had fallen into chaos. However, Pak Donglai, Ko Shintong, and the others were now the largest force in the entire East Sea. Under their joint suppression, the entire breezy ocean adapted to the new order in an extremely short amount of time. As long as it was in the Jianghu, be it in the Central Plains or overseas, it was like a pyramid. It was not a big deal for the upper levels of the pyramid to have problems. What was troublesome was the lower levels. Moreover, Hua Xingzuan had dominated the cool breeze sea for 100 years. Apart from his title of God's Eye, which people took delight in talking about, Hua Xingzuan's reputation was not considered good. Without the support of the Eye of God, Hua Xingzuan was just a mediocre person. His martial arts talent was mediocre, and his vision was narrow. He could only be considered to be a little smart. Pak Donglai and the others did not hide the details of the annihilation of Sovereign Island. If they told others about it, it would actually increase their power. Moreover, most of the people were killed by Chu Xiu, so they did not dare to hide Chu Xiu's power. When they found out that Hu Xingzuan also died in Chu Xiu's hands, everyone shook their heads and sighed. Fate really made a fool out of people. Previously, everyone had heard that Hu Xingzuan wanted to adopt Chu Xiu as his son during his birthday celebration, but they ended up falling out. Now, it seemed like Hu Xingzuan's eye of God did not lose its effect. Chu Xiu was indeed incredibly talented. He killed almost all the higher-ups of Sovereign Island all by himself, and he killed spiritual refinement realm cultivators like slaughtering chickens and dogs. However, it was a pity that those who were chosen by you, Hu Xingzuan, didn't necessarily have to join you, Hu Xingzuan. On the contrary, there was a possibility that they would be the ones to send you to your grave. Hu Xingzuan relied on his pair of god eyes to rise to power. In the end, it could be said that he also died under his pair of god eyes. This could be considered as fate. After the news spread, Pak Donglai gathered everyone to discuss the matter of attacking Eastern Qi, and everything went smoothly. Chu Xiu's might had already spread throughout the cool breeze ocean. This had also greatly increased everyone's confidence in Chu Xiu. As long as they could occupy a part of the border of the Eastern Qi coast, they would have made a huge profit. After everything was prepared, Chu Xiu did not waste any time and immediately prepared to return to Eastern Qi. Before leaving, Pak Donglai and the others personally came to see Chu Xiu off. Official Chu, don't worry. The forces in the East Sea have begun to gather. Once the plan is completed, they will attack the border of Eastern Qi coast at the first opportunity. Chu Xiu nodded and said, I believe in Mr. Bo's strength. This is only the first cooperation, and there may be opportunities for us to work together in the future. I don't know what the situation is in the northern Yan coast, so I won't delay any longer. Everyone farewell. After saying that, Chu Xiu immediately boarded the ship and left with Yi Buxuan. Watching Chu Xiu's departing figure, Pak Donglai suddenly sighed and said, Until today, I seem to have understood a truth. Why is Kang Dongming so obsessed with martial arts? The path of martial arts is as vast and boundless as the East Sea. All our schemes are just like a boat sailing on the sea. It seems stable, but in fact it can't withstand a single wave. Kang Dongming is such a person, and so is Chu Xiu. In the face of absolute power, even a giant steel ship can't withstand a single blow. Ko Shintong also sighed and said, I also understand this truth. Everyone wants to see where the end of the sea is, but unfortunately the more profound one's cultivation is, the more afraid one is of the road ahead. Before I stepped into the true fire spirit refining state, I was also obsessed with cultivation. Every time I went into closed-door training, it would easily last for several years. But now, closed-door training for more than a year is rare. Experts like Pak Donglai and Ko Shintong, who were able to reach the true fire spirit refining state, naturally had talent and perseverance. At this time, they spent most of their time currying favor with other forces instead of practicing martial arts. This was not because they slacked off but because of fear. As Pak Donglai said, martial arts was like this boundless sea, and no one knew where the boundary was. When they first started practicing martial arts, they thought that the real pellet state was the limit. Later, when they reached the real pellet state, they thought that the true fire spirit refining state was the strongest. When they reached the true fire spirit refining state, they discovered that in the face of the heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouses, they were just slightly stronger ants. They couldn't see the boundary, so they were afraid because they didn't know what the road ahead was. People like Kang Dongming's character and Chu Xiu's dedication to power, only such people might be qualified to reach the peak. Let's go back and summon all forces to discuss and attack Eastern Qi as soon as possible. This official Chu has a promising future, and it's always right to be on good terms with him now. Pak Donglai said this not because he also had the divine eyes and was really optimistic about Chu Xiu's future luck, but because Hu Xingzuan had already set a negative example. Be on good terms with Chu Xiu, gain power and gain benefits. Become enemies with Chu Xiu, report to the underworld. At the same time, while Chu Xiu was planning everything overseas, the northern Yin side was almost unable to resist. The national power of Eastern Qi was stronger than that of northern Yin, and similarly, the power of Eastern Qi was also much stronger than that of northern Yin. Within the borders of Eastern Qi, northern Yin Taoist sects and righteous sects had joined forces, and the Yinma clan almost couldn't resist the pressure. The Guanzhong torture room had already retreated, but at the border between Eastern Qi and northern Yin, 7 of Eastern Qi's 9 strong armies suddenly pressed forward, almost causing the northern Yen side to collapse. Baigong Bailey was also a ruthless man. He directly mobilized 1/10 of the entire Fifth Army to fight the enemy, disregarding the casualties. When the number of dead had reached a certain level, he lured the enemy deeper into the battlefield and set up a blood-refining formation on the battlefield, directly killing one of the 9 Eastern Qi armies. At the same time, his own people were also killed in the formation. Could be said that killing 1,000 enemies came with 600 casualties. The entire blood-refining formation stretched for dozens of miles. Within the formation, blood filled the sky, and all life was extinguished. The Eastern Qi side didn't even dare to send large numbers of troops to fight to the death. They could only launch small surprise attacks, afraid that Baigong Bailey would come up with another plan to kill them. This man was practically a madman. When he went crazy, he would even kill his own people. It was only because of Baigong Bailey's prestige that the northern Yen side didn't mutiny. Otherwise, if it were anyone else who dared to do such a thing, they would probably have killed themselves first. In the military camp at the border of northern Yen, Xiang Wu held a banana in one hand and a defensive map in the other, carefully studying it. From time to time he would take a big bite out of the banana, as if he was biting the scum of Eastern Qi. At this time Baigong Bailey opened the tent flap and walked in. He was no longer dressed in a scholar's robe when he was in the northern Yen court. Instead he wore a scarlet armor, and the murderous aura around him seemed to solidify. Seeing Baigong Bailey enter, Xiang Wu handed him a banana. Baigong Bailey shook his head and asked, "How's the situation on your side?" Xiang Wu's expression was solemn. "It's not looking good. I've already pulled back the defensive line by more than 10 miles. I'm using the terrain to deal with them. It wasn't easy to defeat the Eastern Qi's Flying Bear army, but I didn't expect the Imperial Guard to catch up. However, that bastard Nangong Weiyu seems to be injured. Even his flashy halberd is gone. Now he's fighting me with an ordinary precious weapon, but he couldn't hold on after a few blows. If it weren't for that old bastard's speed, I would have crippled him on the spot." As he spoke, Xiang Wu took a big bite out of the banana and swallowed the last bit into his stomach. Baigong Bailey furrowed his brows. "The Imperial Guard is here too? I just killed one of their armies. In the blink of an eye, they have sent out another Yulin Royal Guards. Doesn't that mean that there is only one army guarding all of Eastern Qi?" Xiang Wu spread his hands and said, "There isn't even a single army left. A while ago West Chu had already acted. Yuan Fu, that jade-faced fat dragon, led the Langya army to the West Chu border, but he could only delay the last army of Eastern Qi. West Chu's strength is too weak, and this is already their limit. Otherwise, if all 9 armies were to come, we would be under even more pressure. Now that Eastern Qi's internal and external forces are moving, as long as the imperial city is protected by experts, what do they have to fear? We can't just fly over and kill Lu Haochang, right?" At this stage of the war, it was no longer a matter of strategy but a matter of basic strength. Eastern Qi's national strength was too strong. Once they went all out, the northern Yen could only choose to defend with all their might. Baigong Bailey waved his hand. "Even if we can't hold on, we have to hold on until Lu Haochang can't hold on any longer. Eastern Qi's strength is strong, but perhaps the heavens didn't let Eastern Qi have the luck to unify the world. The successive generations of Eastern Qi's emperors were all mediocre. Our northern Yen has the determination to fight with all 5 armies, but Eastern Qi's heart aches at losing even one army. If we can't take down northern Yen in the end, the last one to retreat will be Eastern Qi." The last war between northern Yen and Eastern Qi ended in the same way. Actually, northern Yen didn't win and Eastern Qi didn't lose either. It was just that Lu Haochang's character was there. He was used to being cautious and didn't want to gamble too much, so he didn't continue to attack and cut his losses in time, tacitly agreeing that northern Yen would tear Wei Jun apart. Now that decades had passed, LV Haochang was already old, and his boldness was probably not as good as it was in the past. Now he only wanted to pass on the throne safely and steadily, and he probably could not withstand any more setbacks. Xiang Wu looked to the east, a rare look of worry on his face. "We can still hold on for a while, but Wei Jun will have to face the entire Eastern Qi's righteous martial world, and the attack of Jiangshan Pavilion. I don't know if they can hold on. Speaking of which, where did Chu Xiu go? Can he be more reliable? He disappeared at the critical moment. I won't treat him to bananas next time." Chapter 1021. Xiang Wu had said that the situation in Wei County was terrible, and it was even worse than what he had said. Wei County was now called Wei Country. Jiangshan Pavilion's newly established Wei country took the lead and recruited all the warriors in Wei County as the vanguard to attack. The Rivers and Mountains Pavilion didn't have any other advantages. Its only advantage was that it was rich, very rich. For so many years, Jiangshan Pavilion had relied on the power of Huixingzuan to almost monopolize the overseas trade with the Central Plains. They had even robbed a lot of business that originally belonged to the Cetacean Society. They had accumulated a lot of wealth over the years. Brave men were bound to be motivated by generous rewards. Although the warriors in Wei County were xenophobic, under the enticement of Jiangshan Pavilion, they obediently followed the orders of Jiangshan Pavilion and acted as the vanguard. Apart from these, Chunyang Dao sect, Real Martial Arts sect, White Tiger Hall, and a group of Eastern Qi Orthodox martial artists joined in, putting great pressure on the Zhenwu Hall. At the moment, the ones in charge of defending Wei County from the northern Yan Kingdom were the Zhenwu Hall, as well as the people from the Yinma clan brought by Wei Shuya, as well as the people from the Imperial Consecration Hall led by Xiang Chong, and even some experts from the northern Yan royal family. Although the number of people gathered in Wei County was not as many as at the border, they were all high-level warriors and the fight was fierce. Most importantly, at the border, Beigong Bailey could still rely on his ruthless strategy and arrangement of troops to restrain Eastern Qi. Over at Wei County, at this point, no matter what strategy you had, it would be useless. It was all about strength. At this time, in a small town near Mount Shangmang in Wei County, Wei Shuya and the others were all there, but they did not look well. Almost all of them were injured. There was still Shangmang Mountain between the Wei County and the eastern Yan region of the northern Yan Kingdom. They had already fought once before, and the result was that the northern Yan Kingdom was defeated and lost Shangmang Mountain. They were forced to the eastern Yan region. In the last battle, Ling Yunzi of the Chunyang Dao sect had attacked directly. The power of the heaven and earth mysterious realm was simply invincible. Although Shang Qianliang's comprehension ability wasn't bad, and his cultivation was already comparable to Ling Yunzi's, his combat strength was still a level lower than Ling Yunzi's. It wasn't because of his own strength, but because of external forces. In a battle between experts, even the slightest gap could determine victory and defeat. Shi Yunzi had activated the pure Yang divine weapon with his blood essence, and Yun Mengzi had taught Ling Yunzi a secret magic that had been lost in Chunyang Dao sect for a long time, which allowed him to activate the mark on the pure Yang divine weapon and defeat Shang Tianliang. At the same time, Wei Shuya and the others began to fight with the warriors from Jiangshan Pavilion, Chunyang Dao sect, True Martial sect, White Tiger Hall, and the Northern Yan Righteous Martial Arts world. This group of people originally had a large number of people. Even on the side of the Righteous Martial Arts world, several hidden rogue cultivators had been invited. They were all experts of the true fire spiritual cultivation realm. In terms of high-end combat strength, they also crushed the people from the Zhenwu Hall. The people from the Zhenwu Hall were almost forced to retreat in defeat. In the end, they had to rely on Xiang Chong to use the origin of the dragon vein in the 9 dragon seal to repel the opponents. However, they had to give up Shangmang Mountain. The origin of the dragon vein could not be used easily. Otherwise, once the origin of the dragon vein was damaged, it would be a great blow to the fate of the Northern Yan nation. If the next attack was still so fierce, the people from the Zhenwu Hall could only retreat again and again. At this time, seeing that the atmosphere in the lobby was a little tense, Lu Jiang he couldn't help but say, "I say everyone don't look like your mother died, okay? Chu Xiu hasn't come back yet. He's our last trump card." Among the people present, almost everyone had some injuries. Only Lu Jiang he's face was ruddy and quite healthy. Although he had reconstructed his body before, the number of people who died in the inheritance war was too small. It was not enough for him to return to his peak. In this war between the righteous and demonic factions, there were too many people participating in the war. The martial artists on both sides added up to more than 100,000. The last war was even more bloody. Almost everyone in the true fire spiritual cultivation realm was injured, and several people in the real pellet state had fallen. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lu Jiang he absorbed the vitality in the battlefield. It could be said that he was getting stronger and stronger. He took this opportunity to restore to his peak state. Of course it was useless. Lu Jiang he's peak state was only at the peak of the true fire spiritual cultivation realm. At that time he was still shouting like a retard on the battlefield that Blood Sea Demon was finally back. As a result, in the blink of an eye he was besieged by Yun Mingzi of Chunyang Dao sect, Han Jusi of True Martial Cult, Helian Changfeng of White Tiger Hall and 2 true fire spiritual cultivation realm masters of Eastern Qi Royal Family Hall. Although he always shouted that he was Blood Sea Demon, he was not the real 4 demon seniors after all, so he couldn't affect the overall situation of the war. Mei Qinglian glanced at him and said, "You have confidence in Chu Xiu." Lu Jianghe laughed twice and didn't speak. He didn't have confidence in Chu Xiu, but he had confidence in Dugu Weiwei. Dugu Weiwei and the sect leader were very entangled. In any case, no matter what the reason was, he didn't believe that Chu Xiu would lose so easily. Therefore, he was very confident that when Chu Xiu returned, it would be the time to turn the situation around. Of course, to be more realistic, he had to think of a way to block the current attack first. His eyes rolled. Lu Jianghe suddenly said to Mei Qinglian, "You are the descendant of the Darkness Demon sect, right?" Mei Qinglian was surprised and said, "Yes, why?" Everyone knew her identity. Why did Lu Jianghe suddenly mention this? Lu Jianghe touched his chin and said, "To be honest, I don't like people of your sect. In the Saint sect, your Darkness Demon sect's ancestor was very gossipy and always liked to talk bad about me. But now we are all on the same side, so I will give you something good." Under Mei Qinglian's puzzled gaze, Lu Jianghe imprinted something on a blank jade slip and threw it to Mei Qinglian. After receiving it, Mei Qinglian asked curiously, "What is this?" Lu Jianghe chuckled and said, "Of course it's something good. It's some of Red Lotus Demon Venerable's insights on the heart-refining art of the Red Lotus fire. It's not a cultivation technique, but it's more useful than a cultivation technique. In the past, your Yin Demon sect's ancestor worshipped the Red Lotus Demon Venerable the most. He followed behind the Red Lotus Demon Venerable every day and even wanted to become his disciple. The Yin Demon sect's immortal maiden great art was able to bring disaster to the gods' hearts. It would bring disaster to others and it would also cause chaos to others. The karmic fire of the Red Lotus refines oneself first, then others. The two have the same effect, but it's obvious that the karmic fire of the Red Lotus is a level higher than your beauty demon sects. Yunoli Jiaodi. She obtained some of Red Lotus Demon Venerable's cultivation technique and cultivated the karmic fire of the Red Lotus, but it's not. If you can comprehend something with this insight, even if you can't cultivate the karmic fire of the Red Lotus, it can still bring your beauty demon technique to the next level. You are still one step away from refining your spirit with true fire, but if you can use the karmic fire to refine your heart, you might be able to take this opportunity to reach the next level. First the heart, then the spirit. Before Mei Qinglian could calm down, Lu Jianghe turned his gaze to Lu Fengxian and said, "You're cultivating the 9 heavens fiend golden body of the ancient demonic god Lu Wenho. That brat Chu Xiu is also cultivating this cultivation technique. Lu Wenho's strength can be said to be the #1 battle general since ancient times, so in terms of cultivation technique, you have no flaws. Furthermore, although you have great luck, your foundation is solid. Breaking through to the true fire spirit refinement realm is only a matter of time. If you want to improve as soon as possible, you can only think of a way through experience. This is the insight left behind by Demon Venerable Zhan Wu. He was the #1 battle general of my holy sect. Even if he can't compare to the legendary Lu Wenho, he still has his merits. This body refining insight is to use battle to nurture battle. The battlefield of the righteous and demonic factions will be a place for you to temper your body. Only in desperate situations can you have a big breakthrough." After throwing another jade slip to Lu Fengxian, Lu Jianghe did not wait for him to speak. He turned his gaze to Ren Shenxiu of the Phaseless Demon sect and threw him a jade slip as well. "I have some friendship with the ancestor of your Phaseless Demon sect, and we even discussed the martial Tao. Demonic formless, mystical arts without spirit. The martial Tao of your Phaseless Demon sect should be between the 3 branches of Tao, Buddha, and Demon. However, when I saw you on the battlefield, the martial Tao of your Phaseless Demon sect seems to have a gap and has lost the charm of the Tao. The things in here should be able to help your cultivation further." Seeing that Lu Jianghe threw out so many good things in one breath, everyone present couldn't react. After a long while, everyone remembered that Lu Jianghe was not just a hall master of the Blood Demon Hall. He was a living fossil who had personally experienced the peak of the Kunlun Devil cult. When the Kunlun Devil cult was destroyed, whether it was the direct descendants of the Kunlun Devil cult or branches like the Phaseless Demon sect, their inheritance was almost broken. As Lu Jianghe, who was from the same generation as their ancestor, he could be said to be a living fossil. As long as he casually revealed something from his mouth, it would be of great benefit to the current inheritors of the Kunlun Devil cult. After a long while, Mei Qinglian asked, "Why didn't you take these things out before?" Lu Jianghe spread out his hands and asked, "Why should I take them out?" Everyone present was stunned for a moment, but then they laughed bitterly and didn't say anything. Previously they felt that Lu Jianghe was a little eccentric. To be precise, he had been eccentric since 500 years ago. However, now it seemed that he was able to sit in the position of Hall Master of the Blood Demon Hall 500 years ago and become a subordinate of the Kunlun Devil cult, second only to the 4 great demon lords. How could he be an idiot? Lu Jianghe didn't do this for Wei Shuya. He could wholeheartedly treat Chu Xiu as an inheritor and hand everything over to Chu Xiu. He was very clear about his position. To be precise, he helped Chu Xiu in exchange for benefits. Chu Xiu hadn't reached the level of Dugu Weiwei, so he wasn't qualified for Lu Jianghe to wholeheartedly serve him. Today he took out these things because the situation was really critical. Even if he didn't care about Chu Xiu, he had to do his best on the side of the devil path. Chapter 1022. The situation in the subduing martial hall had reached a critical point. Even though Lu Jianghe had brought out so many good items, it was useless. Martial arts could not be mastered in a short period of time. Even if they comprehended it now, it was impossible for them to jump to the true fire spirit refinement realm. At this moment, someone suddenly came in to report that Sidu Chi and the others had come to visit. Everyone present frowned. No one thought that Sidu Chi and the others had come for a good thing. Everyone knew about the enmity between Sidu Chi and Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had attacked them more than once or twice. Now that Chu Xiu was in danger, Sidu Chi and the others should be thankful that they did not hit him when he was down. They did not think that they were here to help. Although they belonged to the Lurking Devil clan, they did not think that they would let go of their enmity for the sake of the entire Lurking Devil clan. Compared to them, even the sects of the Bright Devil clan from the moon-worshipping cult were more reliable. Before Wei Shuya could say whether or not he would see them, a shout came from outside. Sidu Chi and the others had barged in. There were a total of 5 true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists who had come in. Besides Sidu Chi and Kuan Mo, the other 3 were the ones who had escaped from the primitive devil cave in the past. They were the 3 big shots of the devil path 800 years ago. No one knew how they had gotten together. Looking at them, Wei Shuya frowned and asked, "Sidu Chi, what are you doing here?" Sidu Chi smiled and said, "Elder Wei, don't be angry. I'm here to help. I've heard about your situation. It's not looking good. We're all from the Lurking Devil clan. How can we sit back and do nothing?" Although Senior Si Wuya is a cultivator from 800 years ago and has nothing to do with the Kunlun Devil cult, they're still from the Fiend path. They're willing to help at a time like this. Wei Shuya said indifferently, "Don't say such high-sounding words. Do you really have such good intentions?" Before Sidu Chi could speak, Si Wuya, the former Grand Elder of the Ghost King sect, said, "The righteous path and the Fiend path are irreconcilable. We're all from the Fiend path. Is it wrong for us to help them? Of course there's a small condition for us to help them. Now my Devil path lineage is divided into Bright Devil and Hidden Devil lineage. Even the Hidden Devil lineage is fighting their own battles. This is not good. That's why I want to emulate the system from 800 years ago and establish the alliance of the demonic path. Whether it's an individual or a sect, everyone can join. Naturally, everyone can also join. Wei Shuya will give you a position as an alliance elder." Everyone's expressions darkened when they heard this. These fellows weren't here to add insult to injury. They were here to loot a burning house. The Hidden Devil clan itself was an alliance. Why would they need an alliance? But who was in charge of the Yinma clan now? On the surface, there was no one in charge of the Yinma clan, but in reality, the one who occupied the majority of the Yinma clan's power was Chu Xiu. He could now be considered the true leader of the Yinma clan. Si Wuya and the others wanted to form an alliance of the Fiend path. They were clearly trying to dig out the roots of the Lurking Devil progeny. Wei Shuya looked at Sidu Chi and said coldly, "Sidu Chi, don't forget that your clan used to be from the Holy Sect. What's the foundation of the Hidden Devil clan? We're the heirs of the Holy Sect. We established the Hidden Devil clan with the Holy Sect's heritage as our foundation. By helping them establish the alliance of the Fiend path, you're digging up the Hidden Devil clan's roots and the Holy Sect's roots. How can you face your ancestors if you do this?" Before Sidu Chi could reply, Si Wuya said, "What do you mean by the Holy Sect? That was 500 years ago. The Kunlun Devil cult has been gone for so long. What's the point of carrying its name? You have to look forward. In terms of seniority, we're all older than your so-called Holy Sect." Lu Jianghe suddenly sneered. He stood up and pointed a finger at Si Wuya's nose as he spat, F***CK. Motherf***ker. Si Wuya and the others were stunned. They did not expect Lu Jianghe would insult him in front of so many people and use such vulgar language. They were experts in the true fire spirit refinement realm. Whether it was now or 800 years ago, whether it was on the noble path or the fiend path, they were people of high status. Even if they had a deep grudge against each other, they would not curse each other the moment they met. Si Wuya pointed a finger at Lu Jianghe. He was so angry that his hands were shaking. Preposterous. Preposterous. Lu Jianghe spat on the ground. He sneered disdainfully and said, "A bunch of wretches. When the sect master founded the holy sect, you idiots were like this. You won't shed a tear until you see your coffin. You'll only kneel and beg the sect master to spare your lives. The holy sect will last for 10,000 years. 10,000 years ago, if the holy sect did not exist, the fiend path did not have an orthodox lineage. However, ever since the holy sect was founded 10,000 years later, even if the holy sect is no more, the fiend path is still the orthodox lineage. How dare trash like you come and dig at the foundation of the holy sect? Do you have a death wish?" As soon as Lu Jianghe finished speaking, the murderous aura around him surged into the sky. A rhythm resounded in the great hall. It was the sound of blood flowing. The expressions of Si Wuya and the others changed. In the end, they did not make a move. They merely waved their sleeves and left. One of them scoffed and said, "Very well. Since you're so stubborn, I'd like to see if your holy sect can still save you when you're cornered by the noble path." After that, Si Wuya and the others left with their tails between their legs. They were here to loot a burning house, not to fight to the death with Lu Jianghe and the others. The expressions of the others darkened. Clearly they were disgusted. Situ Chi and the others had completely shed all pretense of cordiality with the lurking devil progeny. They did not even want to think about saving face anymore. However, the lurking devil progeny still had powerful enemies with them. It would not be appropriate for them to attack them. At this moment, everyone looked at Lu Jianghe in surprise. They did not expect Lu Jianghe to have such a domineering side to him. All this while, they did not have much respect for the hall master of the Blood Devil Hall 500 years ago. Naturally, with Lu Jianghe's silly appearance, they could not bring themselves to respect him. However, today he was domineering for once. He finally felt like an overlord of the fiend path. When Lu Jianghe saw the gazes on him, he could not help but smile wickedly. "If the heaven-devouring tiger doesn't show its might, do you really think I'm a garden cat?" However, his smile completely dissipated the imposing manner from before. The crowd could not help but shake their heads. Well, Lu Jianghe is still the same Lu Jianghe. The crowd did not have time to waste. Almost all of them were injured, so they had to make the best use of their time to recover from their injuries and deal with the next attack. At this moment, in the middle of Shangmang Mountain, there was a large number of camps. They were all people from the major factions. Some of them were rogue cultivators. In order to fight for fame and profit, they also joined the team to kill the fiends. Yun Mingzi and Han Jusi stood at the forefront. As the people who were driving this operation, the two of them could be said to be the leaders of the Righteous Path sections. When they gave orders, they were even more in the limelight than Ling Yunzi and Lu Changlu. It was fortunate that Ling Yunzi and Lu Changlu were not narrow-minded people. Otherwise, they would have to fight amongst themselves before they could settle the matter. Looking at the surrounding scene, Yun Mingzi suddenly sighed and said, "Brother Han, do you remember the battle 800 years ago when our Tao sect joined forces to expel the Buddhism from the Central Plains? At that time it was also the same scene. Even at that time the diabolism could only order us around. I did not expect that now, it is our turn to regard the diabolism as a great enemy. 800 years ago the Jianghu was in chaos. The temples and the Jianghu were in endless war, and it was even more chaotic than now. At present the two most powerful Buddhist sects were in the north. The Great Light Temple was in the north, which was a bitter and cold land 800 years ago. And the Subodhi Zen Monastery was in the southern barbarian land. Until now it was still a desolate place. At that time the Central Plains naturally had the Buddhism. However, at that time the Buddhism was expelled from the Central Plains by the Tao sect. At that time the diabolism was still in a state of disunity. The Kunlun devil cult did not appear. Everyone fought on their own. It could be said that they were the weakest among all the forces in the world. Han Jusi said in a low voice, "Now the diabolism is indeed strong. The moon-worshipping cult of Western Chu used to be a small sect in the Miao territory. I did not expect it to grow into a giant. There is also the Ima clan. I heard that they are only the remnants of the Kunlun devil cult. But the remnants are already so powerful. It is hard to imagine how strong the Kunlun devil cult was in the past. In short, we must be careful. The next time we attack, we will strive to completely defeat the other party. Then we will inform the Eastern Qi Imperial Court to send troops to attack the Northern Yen from the gap we have torn open. We will leave the matter of seizing cities to them. 800 years ago, this was a trick that Han Jusi and the others often used. The Jianghu forces were responsible for defeating the other party's high-end forces. Then the Imperial Court's army would come to clean up the mess. This time they wanted to do the same, but they did not expect that the resistance they encountered would be so tenacious. Although the other party was defeated, they did not collapse. Yun Mingzi looked at the small forces and the other martial artists and snorted coldly. My Chunyang Dao sect may be declining in this era, but our disciples are still capable. There are no cowards who are afraid of death. But these guys are too hateful. They only know how to fight when the wind blows. They can't hold on after suffering a setback. They are defeated before the other party is defeated. If it were not for them, we could have completely eliminated the Yinma clan last time. Han Jusi shook his head. Everyone in the world comes for benefits. This group of people came for benefits. How can you expect them to put their lives on the line? But it does not matter. As long as they can make a move, it will be fine. Right? Have you sent someone to inform Sword King City that they have returned? Yun Mingzi's expression was slightly gloomy. They have returned, but Sword King City's attitude is unclear. It seems that Jin Chanfeng has no way to deal with his juniors. They don't even have the right to express their opinions. Han Jusi waved his hand. Forget it, let's not wait for them. We have enough strength here. This time we must completely defeat the Yinma clan. Chapter 1023. At the border between Shangmang Mountain and Eastern Qi, tens of thousands of martial artists' gang Qis flashed, and a strange phenomenon appeared. Sensing that the righteous martial artists had already made their move, Wei Shuya and the others did not care whether their injuries had healed or not, and immediately rushed forward to meet them. Shang Qinliang's face was a little pale. He snorted coldly and said, Chu Xiu is too scheming. Guarding against I is like guarding against a thief. If he was at ease and let I bring out all the people in Shang City, they would definitely be a great force to be reckoned with after cultivating in the outside world for a while. This time, Shang Tianliang had also attacked with all his strength, but he was still no match for Ling Yunzi, who was wielding the pure yang divine weapon. Wei Shuya did not say anything. He sighed and said, City Lord Shang, if we really can't hold them off, you take your men and retreat first. I will cover their retreat. The surrounding people wanted to say something, but Wei Shuya shook his head and said, There is no need to say anything more. This old man does not have many years left to live, but you are different. As long as the Green Hills last, there is hope. As long as there are people, the lineage of Yin Mo will never end. Wei Shuya was very open-minded about matters of life and death. In the past, 4 of the 5 sky demons of 9 Sky Mountain had died. His 4 brothers had allowed him to live for only one reason, to leave a seed for 9 Sky Mountain. Now Wei Shuya had the same idea. Mei Qinglian, Lu Fengxian, and the others were all seeds of the demonic lineage, and Chu Xiu was even more so. As long as they could live, he had nothing to fear even if he had to risk his life. There was great terror between life and death, and he had already seen through this terror 100 years ago. Mei Qinglian and the others wanted to say something, but Wei Shuya pointed to the front. Yun Mingzi, Han Jusi, and the others had already led a large group of righteous martial artists to attack them. Both sides were already in a situation where they would not rest until one side was dead. Yun Mingzi and the others knew that the demonic lineage would not surrender. Similarly, Wei Shuya and the others also knew that the righteous lineage would not retreat. So there was no need for words and they would just attack. Ling Yunzi wielded the pure Yang Dao sword and attacked Shang Tianliang. The pure Sun divine armament shone brightly and there was even a rhythm that affected the surrounding laws of power. That was the mark of Ancestor Lu on the pure Yang divine weapon. Ling Yunzi had obtained the secret art from Yun Mingzi, and he could finally unleash the full power of the pure Yang divine weapon. Ling Yunzi shook his head and said, I can tell that you're not a member of the demonic path. Since that's the case, why do you insist on helping Chu Xiu to the end? Shang Tianliang snorted. In fact, at the very beginning he had only served Chu Xiu because he wanted Chu Xiu to bring out all the people from the mall. After witnessing Chu Xiu's strength and power, Shang Tianliang had other thoughts. Shang City's people suddenly appeared in Jianghu. Tao was not Tao, Buddha was not Buddha, and devil was not devil. They definitely had to choose a faction to support. The person he chose was Chu Xiu. He believed that with Chu Xiu's potential, he would go further in the future and even reach a realm that even he couldn't imagine. Now, he was fighting to the death with the righteous path for the sake of the Yinma lineage, not only for Chu Xiu but also for himself. When Ling Yunzi saw Shang Qianliang's attitude, he didn't try to persuade him anymore. The pure Yang Dao sword bloomed with extreme pure Yang light. In an instant, everyone seemed to see a second sun. At the border of the righteous and demonic battlefields, there were dozens of sword-wielding warriors standing there. They were the people of Sword King City. Sword King City had been invited by Han Jusi and the others to annihilate the demons, but they didn't take action in the end. Strictly speaking, Sword King City wasn't a righteous sect. In fact, the immoral things they had done in the western regions were even worse than those of the demonic path. Therefore, Sword King City didn't seem to care about the demonic path's actions this time. However, this battle between the righteous path and the demonic path would affect the development of the martial arts world in the Central Plains. Even if Sword King City wasn't prepared to take action, they had to come and watch. At that moment, on Sword King City's side, a tall and thin sword-wielding warrior with a mustache snorted. "I've already said it before. Stand on the side of the righteous path and kill the demonic path. This will definitely be of great help to Sword King City's power. I'm very familiar with Yun Mingzi and Han Jusi. They are both outstanding figures of the Dao sect 800 years ago. Now that they have joined forces, there's no reason for them to lose. It's such a big matter and we, Sword King City, are only spectators. It's such a waste." The person who spoke was called Jin Chanfeng. He was one of the warriors from 800 years ago and one of Sword King City's elders. However, compared to Han Jusi and the others who could control part of the sect, Jin Chanfeng was much more unlucky. None of the three from Sword King City were easy to deal with. Heavenly King Shen was domineering and dictatorial. Meng Yanghe was extreme and gloomy. Apart from Heavenly King Shen, he wouldn't listen to anyone. Du Guli was a warrior of the older generation and a member of the former royal family. He had a fiery temper. Sometimes when his temper flared up, he even dared to scold Heavenly King Shen. Given the personalities of these three, it would be wishful thinking for Jin Chanfeng to seize power from them. When the righteous path had invited them to take action, Jin Chanfeng had wanted to agree. However, he had been rejected by Heavenly King Shen and the other two. To Heavenly King Shen and the others, true fire spirit refinement realm cultivators were indeed something they needed. It should be said that all large sects needed them. However, what they needed were obedient true fire spirit refinement realm cultivators who were on their side, not people who stirred up trouble from the sidelines. What did their ancestors from 800 years ago have to do with them? If they were dead, they would respectfully pay their respects. If they were alive, sorry. It was not like 800 years ago anymore. If they followed the rules, they were still a member of Sword King City. If they did not follow the rules, they would be considered traitors. Who knew, they might even want to punish them. At that moment, no one cared about what Jin Chanfeng and the others had said. Du Guli turned to Fang Qishao and asked, "Seventh young master, who do you think will win?" Fang Qishao stood stiffly in front of the big shots of the sects, looking rather serious. Although he was an unreliable person, he still knew how to read people's expressions. If he dared to say anything inappropriate now, he would probably die a horrible death when he returned to Sword King City. Upon hearing that, Fang Qishao did not even think about it. He only said in a low voice, "I don't know who will win, but I know that the hidden demons will definitely not lose." Heavenly King Shen was surprised. "Why? Just because of Chu Xiu? You think so highly of Chu Xiu?" Fang Qishao nodded. "It really is because of Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu dies, I dare say that the hidden demons will definitely lose. But if Chu Xiu is still alive, even if he is the only one left in the entire hidden demons, he will still be able to make a comeback." Jin Chanfeng could not help but snort. 800 years ago there were countless amazing talents in the pugilistic world, but what happened in the end? Human strength cannot defeat the heavens. There are many heroes in every era of the pugilistic world, but how many of them can survive until the end? What right does Chu Xiu have to do that? Fang Qishao glanced at him and said lightly, "Because Chu Xiu is the first person I dare not say I can surpass." Heavenly King Shen could not help but be surprised when he heard Fang Qishao's words. Although Fang Qishao was usually unruly and even gave Heavenly King Shen headaches, they knew how talented Fang Qishao was. Under that unruly appearance he was very proud. Before Chu Xiu became famous, Fang Qishao had fought with both Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen, but he had lost. But even if he had lost, Fang Qishao had never been convinced by his opponents. He had never thought that he was weaker than Zhong Xian and Zhang Qingzhen. Life was only a few hundred years. If he could not enjoy himself, then what was the point of living? Swordsmanship was his passion. Drinking and visiting brothels were also his passions. If Fang Qishao could spend all his time cultivating swordsmanship, with his talent he would definitely become a powerful swordsman like Qiu Tianya and Kang Dongming in the future. But everyone had their own way of living. Fang Qishao did not want to live like Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian. It was not that he did not care about cultivation. It was just that there were too many interesting things in the world. He did not want to let them go. Heavenly King Shen was very clear about Fang Qishao's thoughts. That was why he was surprised to see Fang Qishao praise Chu Xiu so much. Fang Qishao's words proved that, in his opinion, even if he was a swordsman and cultivated crazily every day, he would still not be able to catch up to Chu Xiu. At that moment, Fang Qishao suddenly said, "Of course this is only in terms of strength. In terms of looks, other than brother Lu Fengxian, I've never been afraid of anyone. Other than the sword in my hand, I also rely on my face to make a living. The last time I went to the Floral Moon House, those girls were shocked by my handsomeness and elegance. They did not even have the nerve to ask for money. I was already one street away but they were still chasing after me." Heavenly King Shen's face immediately darkened. "Drag him away." Bai Qian, who was following behind Heavenly King Shen, shook his head. He covered Fang Qishao's mouth and dragged him to the back, not letting him express his proud words. It was Jin Chanfeng's first time seeing Fang Qishao like this. He could not help but be stunned. He said to Heavenly King Shen, "Is this the future successor of Sword King City?" Although Heavenly King Shen felt embarrassed, he still snorted coldly and said, "Why? Are you not convinced? When Fang Qishao reaches the true fire spirit refinement stage you can fight him. If you can win, I will give you the position of Sword King City sect leader." Jin Chanfeng shook his head. He really believed it. The reason was simple. Based on Fang Qishao's behavior, if his talent in Sword Dao was really not good, he would probably have been hung up on Sword King City's banner long ago. Meanwhile, on the battlefield between the Orthodox and Demon sects, although Fang Qishao thought highly of Chu Xiu, the hidden demons were already on the verge of collapsing before Chu Xiu even appeared. In the previous battle, almost everyone from the hidden demons' side was injured. This time the Orthodox sects had made another move. Under the pressure, the hidden demons were already in a precarious situation. Chapter 1024. On the stalemate battlefield, the Yinma clan had begun to collapse. Compared with the righteous sects, the composition of the Yinma clan was simpler and more united. Jinwu Hall guarded the forces left by Chu Xiu. The Yinma clan guarded the bottom line of the demonic path. Xiang Chong and others of the northern Yen clan couldn't retreat. Therefore they all had the determination to fight to the death, but unfortunately in the face of absolute power, a little determination couldn't save the situation. There were too many people on the righteous sect's side. If you repelled one there would be another two immediately. Now Mei Qinglian had this feeling. She was actually not very good at this kind of fierce battlefield. The enchanted girl technique was unknowingly bewitching. In this kind of fierce battlefield the evil spirits soared into the sky. Everyone's body would unknowingly be contaminated with some evil spirits, which had some impact on their own mental power. It also caused the effect of the enchanted girl technique to be greatly reduced. 4 real pellet state martial artists attacked her wildly. 2 of them were martial artists of the Chunyang Dao sect. His pure yang aura was extremely restraining to Mei Qinglian. The other 2 real pellet state martial artists of the righteous sects attacked wildly, forcing Mei Qinglian's figure to turn into a demonic mist. She flashed and moved, but she was gradually forced into a dead end by the pure yang aura. Enchantress. Die. Seeing that Mei Qinglian had been forced into a dead end, the 2 Chunyang Dao sect martial artists shouted at the same time, and the pure yang aura on their long swords skyrocketed. Kill the evil, subdue the demon. At this moment, Mei Qinglian's mind couldn't help but reverberate with the Red Lotus Demon Venerable's experience on the Red Lotus Hellfire that Lu Jianghe had given her. The Red Lotus Hellfire could refine one's mind and soul. One must first bear the roasting of the Hellfire in order to truly refine the Red Lotus Hellfire to burn others. At this moment, Mei Qinglian's mind was completely relaxed, and her mental power also drifted away. However, it wasn't attacking the opponent in front of her, but immersed in her own mind. In an instant, illusions appeared in front of her eyes. Some were good, some were bad, some were good, some were what she wanted in her life and some were things that she couldn't ask for in her life. She was the holy maiden of the Yin demon sect, but in reality, many people had called her a demoness. In the past, when the Yin demon ancestor was still around, she could be carefree and use her talent to tease the young elites of the righteous path. Her temperament was weird, and compared to her current enchanting appearance, it was like they were two different people. That was the happiest time of Mei Qinglian's life, until the destruction of the Dark Demon sect. She was the sole survivor of the Yin demon sect. What she carried on her was the inheritance of the Yin demon sect, the future of the Yin demon sect. However, no one knew that she wasn't good at these things at all. However, for the sake of her responsibilities, for the sake of her seniors who had died in the past, even if she wasn't good at it, she had to carry it on her shoulders. That was why the weird holy maiden of the Yin demon sect became the enchanting Madame Mei, hiding in the Guanzhong torture room. You could say that she was bearing the burden or struggling at death's door. At that time, Mei Qinglian didn't have a goal until she met Chu Xiu. She didn't know when it started, but she didn't have to think about so many things. She only needed to listen to Chu Xiu's orders. This kind of life was actually very relaxing. It seems like I've always been a stupid woman. Mei Qinglian sighed helplessly. Who said that the holy maiden of the demonic path had to be sinister, ruthless, and full of schemes? She had endured for so many years, and perhaps today was the day she saw herself clearly. The karmic fire of the Red Lotus refined the heart and soul. If she couldn't see herself clearly, how could she use the karmic fire of the Red Lotus? Just like Li Jiaodi, she was stubborn all her life, but she got the Red Lotus hellfire in the end. This wasn't like an opportunity but more like irony. The next moment, the dazzling red hellfire on Mei Qinglian's arms bloomed. It burned all the way to the two disciples of the Chunyang Dao sect along the pure Yang Qi. The two of them screamed in an instant, and a large amount of hellfire bloomed from their 7 orifices. In less than a second, the two of them had fallen to the ground, and they were completely lifeless. Hellfire tempering heart. Obviously they didn't survive this. When the other 2 real pellet state martial artists saw this scene, they turned around and fled directly. But the next moment, Mei Qinglian waved her hand, and a red lotus bloomed between their eyebrows. The boundless red lotus hellfire surrounded them and instantly swallowed them. The red lotus hellfire was colorless and formless. As long as you had negative karma in your heart, no matter where you hid, the red lotus hellfire would bloom and burn in your heart. Lu Jianghe, who was being besieged by Zhao Yuanfeng of Jiangshan Pavilion, took a look below and saw that Mei Qinglian had really comprehended the red lotus hellfire. He was really shocked. In the past, the 4 demon venerables of the Kunlun devil cult were strong because they were almost the best among the same realm, whether it was the true fire-tempering state or the heaven and earth mysterious state. Back then, Red Lotus Demon Venerable relied on the Red Lotus Hellfire to dominate the martial world. It was unpredictable and impossible to guard against. Previously, Lu Jianghe just saw that Mei Qinglian's state of mind was somewhat similar to Red Lotus Demon Venerables, so he gave her the Red Lotus Demon Venerable's insight with a trial attitude. He didn't expect her to really cultivate it. Of course, Mei Qinglian could only be considered to have cultivated half of it, because what Lu Jianghe gave her was only insight, not the Red Lotus Demon Venerable's inheritance technique. In the past, Red Lotus Demon Venerable still had countless secret techniques and killer moves that had to be used with the Red Lotus Hellfire. Now it definitely couldn't be used. At this time, Lu Jianghe subconsciously turned his gaze again, but when he saw the situation on Lu Fengxian's side, he widened his eyes in horror. If Mei Qinglian's breakthrough was still considered common sense, then Lu Fengxian was purely a monster. She simply didn't play by the rules. At this time, Lu Fengxian's performance on the battlefield was also very dazzling. The demon god unparalleled halberd that he inherited from LV1Ho was originally a martial art that could exert its greatest effect on the battlefield. The unparalleled halberd danced and swept across the area. When it smashed down, the ground would shake. Its power was unparalleled. Shui Wuxiang and the other 3 guarded around Lu Fengxian to prevent anyone from sneak attacking Lu Fengxian. The 4 of them had also recovered to the real pellet state at this time. At this time they were fighting with Lu Fengxian. They actually had the feeling of following LV1Ho to conquer the world. When the 5 of them joined forces, they even beat more than a dozen real pellet state martial artists to retreat step by step. They didn't dare to fight head-on at all. With Lu Fengxian's powerful halberd, they would either die or be crippled if they were hit by it. Previously in the underworld, Lu Fengxian had some fame, but it could only be said to be a little famous. Not to mention compared with Chu Xiu, among the martial artists of his generation, even Zhang Qingzhen, Zhong Xian, and Fang Qishao were more famous than him. Moreover, Lu Fengxian had always been relatively low-key. As a result, when they went to the battlefield this time, they knew the horror of Lu Fengxian. Especially this time, after Lu Fengxian read the physical cultivation experience of Zhan Wu Demon Venerable, he had a deeper understanding. His power on the battlefield was simply immeasurable. However, his high-profile actions had also attracted the attention of others. Mako Mori broke away from the battle with Wei Shuya and let others continue to block Wei Shuya. He stepped forward and came in front of Lu Fengxian. He grabbed with one hand and a dazzling pure yang aura burst out. He directly grabbed Lu Fengxian's unparalleled halberd in his hand. Feeling the unparalleled power, Mako Mori's complexion changed slightly. He really didn't expect that a real pellet state martial artist would have this kind of power. But with a difference of one realm, Mako Mori was still one of the few older martial artists who could still maintain their combat power after cultivating for more than 300 years. In terms of strength, he was much more powerful than Lu Fengxian. With a wave of one hand, a powerful pure yang aura burst out, directly blasting Lu Fengxian away. Looking at Lu Fengxian, who retreated for hundreds of meters, Mako Mori stood with his hands behind his back and he said slowly, "Lu Fengxian, I have heard of your name. Although you always hang out with Chu Xiu, you only inherited the ancient demon god Lu Wenho's technique, but you are not an orthodox demonic cultivator. Your friends in the past are all saying that you are loyal and willing to do anything for your friends. For so many years, you have never done a bad thing and I believe that you are not a bad person. However, why do you choose to help the wicked? Chunyang Dao sect abhors evil, but they don't want to kill innocent people. Lu Fengxian, you should retreat. Don't continue to embark on the wrong path. The monks have a saying that is very reasonable, repent and you will be saved." Lu Fengxian shook her head and said, "Taoist priest is wrong. I have never felt that I am very loyal, and I have never felt that I am a good person. When I stepped into the martial world, I once asked my master what is chivalrous and whether I want to be a chivalrous person or not. Master only told me one sentence: do what you think is right. If you think it is wrong, do it. Chivalrous for the sake of chivalrous, that is not really chivalrous. It is not easy for a person to live up to his own heart in this life. I, Lu Fengxian, came from a humble background. I have no interest in governing the world, nor do I have the ability to make everything peaceful. As long as I live up to my own heart, my life is not in vain. Whether Brother Chu is a righteous or a demonic cultivator has nothing to do with me. I only know that he is my brother and good friend. When I was in danger, he saved me and helped me. If someone treats me well, I will repay him tenfold. I don't know if the path I am walking on is right or wrong, but today I don't want to turn back. Even if I turn back, there is no shore." As Lu Fengxian's voice fell, the unparalleled divine weapon in his hand bloomed with a dazzling light. The unparalleled demonic god halberd was used to the extreme by him. Every strike of the halberd seemed to have the power to shatter mountains and break rivers. The demonic aura surged and roared, even causing the wind and clouds in the air to howl angrily. That power was infinitely close to the true fire spirit refinement state. Mako Mori did not want to kill a good person by mistake, but Lu Fengxian refused to come to his senses, so he had no choice. He held the Dao sword in his hand and lightly tapped it. Compared to the mighty demon god unparalleled halberd, the minute amount of pure yang astral chi was only a tiny bit weaker, but the power that exploded out was enough to send Lu Fengxian flying again and again. But at this moment, Mako Mori was shocked to find that every time Lu Fengxian was sent flying, the whistling demonic aura in the air became denser. In the end, the demonic aura actually formed a huge tornado and surged into Lu Fengxian's body. Why did this scene seem so similar to the scene of breaking through to the true fire spirit refinement state? Chapter 1025. There had been breakthroughs in battle before, but most of them happened below the real pellet state. There were only a handful of people who broke through in battle above the real pellet state. Whether it was condensing martial Dao true pellet or tempering true fire spirit refinement, these realms were extremely dangerous. Once something went wrong, it was easy to fail, leading to the abolishment of cultivation. Therefore, 99% of the martial artists would find a safe place to break through again as long as they had the conditions. Not to mention that the state was unstable during the battle, there was also the enemy nearby. How could they let you break through safely? But now Lu Fengxian's state was indeed very similar to the scene caused by the true fire spirit refinement state, tempering the essence soul with the internal fire and then attracting the power of heaven and earth. However, whether Lu Fengxian was going to break through or not, Mako Mori couldn't ignore it. Shou Jinzi's figure flashed and he rushed towards LV Fengxian. Shui Wuxiang and the others wanted to block him, but they were all sent flying by Shou Jinzi. But at this moment, in the huge demonic chi vortex above Lu Fengxian's head, a hazy phantasm appeared faintly. The phantasm was wearing black armor, and his face couldn't be seen clearly. Only the scarlet eyes could be seen faintly. The unparalleled relic was held in the hands of the phantasm. As it roared, the wind and clouds gathered, and the sky changed color. Demon God. LV1Ho. This was the last trace of imprint left by LV1Ho in Lu Fengxian's body. As he stepped into the true fire spirit refinement state this time, it was completely integrated with him. Other people tempered their own essence soul in the true fire spirit refinement state, but Lu Fengxian also tempered the essence soul imprint left by LV1Ho when he stepped into the true fire spirit refinement state. The demon god phantasm smashed down with his halberd, and the monstrous demonic chi seemed to be tearing the ground apart. The power was simply immeasurable. Mako Mori's complexion changed suddenly. He turned from offense to defense. His hands successively engraved countless pure yang Dao patterns in the air with pure yang chi, condensing into a barrier in front of him. But in the next moment, the halberd smashed down. The pure yang Dao pattern didn't even last for a breath of time before it shattered. Mako Mori's entire body was sent flying by the halberd, smashing into the ground thousands of feet away, creating a huge crater. Mako Mori struggled to get up. His face was pale as he coughed. He could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. That halberd strike just now was not Lu Fengxian's power, but an ultimate strike left behind by the demon god LV1Ho. Even if it was just a mark, it was not something that Mako Mori could easily resist. At this time, the demon god's shadow had already begun to distort in the boundless demon chi vortex. Finally, it all entered Lu Fengxian's body. In the blink of an eye, the aura around Lu Fengxian's body began to rise, and in the end, it skyrocketed to the level of the true fire spirit refinement realm before stopping. Lu Fengxian had attracted the attention of more than half of the people on the battlefield. Stepping into the true fire spirit refinement realm in the face of battle was something that could be called a miracle, but they actually saw it. Carrying halberd, Lu Fengxian was still a little confused at this moment. In fact, he did not have any plans to step into the true fire spirit refinement realm. It should be said that no matter what realm he broke through before, it was all up to fate. He cultivated when he needed to cultivate and rested when he needed to rest. Therefore, almost every time he broke through a realm, it was as if success came naturally. This time, perhaps because Mako Mori had given him too much pressure, this also led to Lu Fengxian actually stepping into the true fire spirit refinement realm in this state. Of course, this was also a good thing. Although the Hidden Devil clan had one more true fire spirit refinement realm warrior, it could still reduce some of the pressure. Therefore, Lu Fengxian did not care that he had not adapted to his current strength. He directly took halberd and attacked Mako Mori again. On the battlefield, although Mei Qinglian and Lu Fengxian had made successive breakthroughs, it was very difficult to reverse the situation of this kind of battle without the help of the heaven and earth mysterious realm powerhouses. Therefore, the situation did not change much. The Hidden Devil clan was still at a disadvantage. Shang Tianliang was almost unable to hold on under Ling Yunzi's pure yang sword. Wei Shiya was besieged by 3 true fire spirit refinement realm warriors and could not hold on any longer. After all, Wei Shiya was not young anymore. Although his combat strength was amazing, the longer this went on, the more he was at a disadvantage. Among the people besieging Wei Shiya was Yun Mingzi of the Chunyang Dao sect. As the former head of the 6 spiritual masters of the Chunyang Dao sect, Yun Mingzi, who was at his peak, might not lose even if he fought Wei Shiya one-on-one. However, he chose to besiege Wei Shiya so that he would not waste too much of his strength. During the chaotic battles of the pugilistic world 800 years ago, there were many more situations in which people besieged each other than one-on-one. Yun Mingzi had adapted to this fighting style. Seeing that Wei Shiya was almost unable to hold on any longer, Yun Mingzi's eyes flashed with killing intent. On the long sword in his hand, a thin golden light appeared. With a point of his sword, the pure yang sword chi strangely condensed into an imperceptible sword thread and pierced towards Wei Shiya. Wei Shiya's expression changed when he sensed this power. He wanted to stop it, but he was held back by the other 2 people. He was a step too slow. The sword thread was unusually sharp, so it directly pierced through Wei Shiya's vital energy shield and penetrated his body. In an instant, with the sword thread as a guide, an endless amount of pure yang chi penetrated Wei Shiya's body. With a loud bang, he was sent flying, spitting out blood. Wei Shuya looked at Yun Mingzi in astonishment. Although his martial arts were the same as the current Chunyang Daoist sect, his fighting style was different. In fact, there was even a hint of malice in it. Wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth, Wei Shuya looked around. Even Shang Tianliang, who was the strongest on their side, was showing signs of being unable to hold on. With a sigh, Wei Shuya shouted, "Retreat!" Yun Mingzi snorted coldly and said, "It's too late to retreat now." As he said this, an endless amount of pure yang energy condensed on his long sword. As the sword slashed down, a long and narrow sword light spread out for hundreds of feet. It danced in the air like a waterfall, drawing on the power of heaven and earth. It formed a dazzling golden storm, which directly smashed down on Wei Shuya. When it was time to kill, Yun Mingzi did not hesitate at all. He did not attack, but once he attacked he would definitely kill. As a Taoist priest of the Chunyang Dao sect, when he attacked he was as ruthless as an assassin. Wei Shuya had previously said that he would stay behind to protect the Yinma clan one last time, just like how his 4 brothers had protected him on the 9th Heaven Mountain back then. Today he was old. He could die, but the future of the Yinma clan could not be destroyed. Wei Shuya's expression was calm. He shouted to retreat, but his body moved to meet Yun Mingzi's mighty sword. He formed a complicated seal, and a surging devil chi condensed behind him. This was a seal that his brother had passed on to him in the past. It did not have a name. Because after using the seal technique and risking his life, his big brother directly died, and he didn't even have a name. The devil chi triggered by this nameless seal was so powerful that half of the sky had been dyed black. Just as Wei Shuya's seal was about to be completed, an ear-piercing whistling sound was heard. The black arrow seemed to pass through space, and with a destructive fire, it drew a long trajectory and directly bombarded Yun Mingzi's arrow. With a loud bang, the pure yang energy and the power of nirvanic extermination cancelled each other out and exploded, bursting out waves of terrifying waves. At this moment, everyone present turned to look behind them. The moment they saw this arrow, they knew that Chu Xiu had finally returned. For the entire Yinma clan, or more accurately all the forces under Chu Xiu, only he, Chu Xiu, was the only core. Wei Shuya had prestige and Shang Tianliang had strength, but neither of them could replace Chu Xiu. Before Chu Xiu had appeared, everyone was already on the verge of collapse. However, the moment Chu Xiu returned, the collapse was completely reversed. Everyone seemed to have gained a lot of strength for nothing. On the other hand, when the people from the righteous sects looked at Chu Xiu, they could not help but reveal a hint of panic and even fear. Chu Xiu's reputation wasn't given to him by others. It was earned with the blood and lives of countless people. It could even be said that the deterrence that Chu Xiu brought to them was even greater than that of Shang Tianliang, a mysterious heaven and earth realm expert. At this moment, even the people of Sword King City who were watching from the side were stunned. They had never expected that Chu Xiu's appearance would cause such a great impact. Glancing at the battlefield, although everyone was in a sorry state, there were not many casualties. LV Fengxian had even broken through to the true fire spirit refinement realm, and Mei Qinglian's aura had also soared. Chu Xiu smiled and said, "I'm sorry everyone. I've been overseas for a long time. However, judging from your expressions, I'm not too late." Lu Jiang, he snapped, "You're not too late? If you were any later, you would only be able to collect our corpses." Chu Xiu looked at the people of the Chunyang Dao sect and the other righteous path sects and narrowed his eyes. "Don't worry. Even if I have to collect your corpses, I will send them down to be buried with you." Ling Yunzi and the others present had dealt with Chu Xiu before, so they knew that Chu Xiu's words were not harsh. He was definitely capable of doing such a thing. This was the first time Yun Mingzi and Han Jisi had seen Chu Xiu. They had seen the famous Chu Xiu of their righteous path sects, and they hated him to the core. It could be said that Chu Xiu was even more extraordinary than what Yun Mingzi and the others had imagined. Based on his aura alone, they could no longer regard Chu Xiu as a martial artist of the younger generation. Instead, he was an overlord of the devil path who could compete with them in Jianghu. Yun Mingzi shook his head and said, "Before you appeared, we were worried that you would not be able to find a mysterious heaven and earth realm expert to change the situation. But now it seems that you have no reinforcements and there is no breakthrough. Chu Xiu, this is the general trend. You can't stop it alone." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "The general trend? I've never believed in the general trend. Besides, how do you know whose side the general trend is on?" Chapter 1026. Yun Mingzi wasn't afraid that Chu Xiu's appearance had turned the tables on both sides. Momentum was momentum, strength was strength, and the saying that soldiers with righteous indignation were bound to win was just an exception. However, what really made Yun Mingzi uncertain was that Chu Xiu seemed to be very relaxed, as if he had already solved the problem in front of him. Where did he get his confidence from? At this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly turned his gaze to Zhao Yuanfeng. An inexplicable smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Pavilion leader Zhao, to be precise, should I call you Prince Zhao now? Your Jiangshan pavilion has been doing well overseas. Why do you have to intervene in the conflict of the Central Plains warriors? It's one thing for you to intervene, but you went back on your word and chose to cooperate with Eastern Qi. That's a bit too much. Zhao Yuanfeng said calmly, the Northern Yin pulled Jiangshan Pavilion to the Central Plains just to make use of us. Since we're all using each other, why don't I find a powerful backer to be used? That would make me more valuable, wouldn't it? People in the pugilistic world have no control over themselves. Official Chu, Jiangshan Pavilion didn't mean to be your enemy, but now we have no choice. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, that's fine. Since you didn't mean it, I'll forgive you. Take the people from the River Mountain Pavilion and leave, and I won't pursue this matter. Hearing this, Zhao Yuanfeng and the others were stunned. Chu Xiu didn't play by the rules. He had only said a few words. Why did Chu Xiu take it seriously? The elder from the Zhao family of Jiangshan Pavilion snorted. Alright, why are you wasting time talking to him? Let's get this over with. Previously, when Jiangshan Pavilion had just entered Yanjing City, he had a conflict with Chu Xiu. This Zhao family elder still retained some of the royal family's behavior in the past and viewed that incident as a disgrace. Therefore, when Jiangshan Pavilion switched to Eastern Qi, this elder of the Zhao family had put in a lot of effort. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, it seems that Jiangshan Pavilion is still unrepentant. Forget it, people always have to be responsible for the decisions they make. Pavilion Master Zhao, I'll give you a present today. As soon as Chu Xiu finished speaking, he threw something at Zhao Yuanfeng, which rolled to his feet. It was a human head. When he saw the head, Zhao Yuanfeng's expression suddenly changed. He cried out involuntarily, Godfather. The head that Chu Xiu threw to him was Hua Xingzuan's head. Once Hua Xingzuan was dead, his body was naturally useless. Therefore, before he left, Chu Xiu remembered that Jiangshan Pavilion had also attacked Eastern Qi, so he asked Pak Donglai for Hua Xingzuan's head as a surprise for Zhao Yuanfeng. Now it seemed that this surprise was enough. At least, Zhao Yuanfeng's current appearance was indeed very shocking. As for whether he was happy or not, only he himself knew. You killed Godfather? How could you possibly kill Godfather? The moment he saw Hua Xingzuan's head, Zhao Yuanfeng completely lost his composure. Actually, when Hua Xingzuan died, Zhao Yuanfeng wasn't that sad. It had to be said that Hua Xingzuan was a failure as a godfather. He bound his godsons with benefits, and there was no familial love between them. For example, back on Paragon Island, Fu Longxiao had thought of abandoning Hua Xingzuan and escaping on his own. Now that he saw Hua Xingzuan's corpse, Zhao Yuanfeng was more shocked than sad. Although he didn't have any feelings for Hua Xingzuan, he knew how powerful Hua Xingzuan's influence in the Breeze Sea was. He was a supreme figure who lived up to his name. But now his head was brought to him by Chu Xiu. What did this prove? It proved that there was a huge change in the Breeze Sea. The Hua family on Paragon Island had been completely overthrown. As Hua Xingzuan's godson, his foundation in the Breeze Sea was gone. He couldn't return to Jiangshan Pavilion anymore. Moreover, as the pavilion master of Jiangshan Pavilion, and Hua Xingzuan thought highly of him, Zhao Yuanfeng was very capable. He thought for a while and his body instantly turned cold. Chu Xiu was the core figure of the Yinma clan. But after the Eastern Qi Imperial Court and the righteous martial arts world attacked the Northern Yin for such a long time, he didn't show up except to solve the predicament of the Guanzhong torture room. This was very suspicious. Now that Chu Xiu came here with Hua Xingzuan's head, it was obvious where he had been during this period. Thinking of the location of the Breeze Sea and the fact that Eastern Qi had put all the powerful armies on the 9 borders, Zhao Yuanfeng had vaguely figured out Chu Xiu's plan. This time Jiangshan Pavilion might really be on the wrong side. The others didn't know how much Zhao Yuanfeng was thinking. They actually didn't know much about Zhao Yuanfeng's background. Seeing that Chu Xiu threw out a head and Zhao Yuanfeng called him his adoptive father, they thought that Chu Xiu just killed an old man of Jiangshan Pavilion, who was Zhao Yuanfeng's adoptive father, to vent his anger. They didn't know what Zhao Yuanfeng's adoptive father represented. Seeing that Zhao Yuanfeng's state was not right, and even the momentum of the whole battle had changed since Chu Xiu showed up, Yun Mingzi and Han Jusi looked at each other and shouted together, "Kill! Don't stop!" The first spurt of energy, the second spurt of energy, the third spurt of energy. Originally, the righteous martial arts world wasn't united, and there were more people who wanted to fish in troubled waters. At this time, if they let Chu Xiu continue to talk like this, there might be some changes. Cut the Gordian knot and kill the enemy in one spurt of energy, no conspiracy or trick would work. Chu Xiu looked at Shang Tianliang and said, City Lord Shang, can you still hold on? The meridians in Shang Tianliang's body had been penetrated by pure yang sword qi, and now he seemed a little weak. We won't be able to hold on for long. If you don't bring reinforcements, I won't be able to hold on any longer. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, Don't worry, it won't be long before news comes. Just after Chu Xiu left the East Sea, Pak Donglai and the others had gathered the elites of the East Sea at the fastest speed, and began to attack the coastal border of Eastern Qi. At present, except for the elite guards in Great Liang City of Eastern Qi, the other 9 border-strong armies had been pulled to the northern Yan border by Eastern Qi. The martial arts forces in the East Sea did not even have the slightest understanding of battle formations. They only needed to attack chaotically for a while, and the ordinary troops left by Eastern Qi would not be able to hold on. Therefore, Eastern Qi would have to retreat as soon as possible. Of course, at the moment, it was still up to Chu Xiu and the others to carry on. Looking at Yun Mingzi and Han Jusi, a dangerous glint flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes. He already knew that this war between the righteous and demonic factions was caused by these two. After being locked in the primitive demon's lair for 800 years, they still did not learn their lesson. As soon as they came out, they wanted to cause trouble. Damn it. The evil moon saber was already in Chu Xiu's hand, and the inner demon was suppressing the weapon spirit of the evil moon saber. In an instant, the blood moon bloomed, and the saber light distorted the surrounding space. With a slash, Chu Xiu went straight for Yun Mingzi. At this moment, Yun Mingzi had a feeling that he was being stared at by some terrifying beast. In the next moment, Yun Mingzi's body shone with pure yang astral energy, and the sword light traversed the sky. The surrounding heaven and earth Yuan Qi was like a raging storm, gathering around his sword. The blood moon on the evil moon saber distorted space, and no matter what kind of power it was, it would be distorted by the blood moon. Chu Xiu's saber slashed down with extreme strength, and it also contained the saber intent of the broken sea of the 7 limits. It was as if it could shatter mountains and break rivers, and everything was collapsing. When the sword and blade collided, an intense shockwave instantly erupted forth. Yun Mingzi instantly felt an unbearable force rushing towards him. A crack appeared on his divine weapon, and his entire person was sent flying by Chu Xiu's slash. Fresh blood splattered from his body as he flew through the air. At this moment, everyone was stunned. As for Yun Mingzi, he was an expert from 800 years ago, so most people were unfamiliar with him. However, they were not unfamiliar with the position of the head of the 6 Temple Protector Spiritual Masters. Throughout history, those who could sit in this position in Chunyang Dao sect were not weak. Mako Mori looked at Chu Xiu in horror. How long had it been? Compared to when he was in the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu's strength had improved. His strength was a bit stronger than when he was in the Guanzhong torture room. Perhaps the most terrifying thing about Chu Xiu was not his strength, but the speed of his improvement. When you were still looking at him with the old eyes, and when you were still using your old strength to plot against him, he could come up with unexpected strength and smash everything you had planned. Seeing that Chu Xiu's saber slashed Yun Mingzi until he vomited blood, Han Jusi's expression changed, and he shouted in a low voice, "Let's attack together. He's not at the heaven and earth mystic realm, so what are you afraid of?" Unless he was at the heaven and earth mystic realm and had the strength to effect the battle, he would die of exhaustion. Just like when Xiang Chong held the 9 dragon seal and unleashed the power of the dragon vein, it was infinitely close to the heaven and earth mystic realm, but in the end he was the first to collapse. As Han Jusi's voice fell, he and Lu Changlu attacked Chu Xiu together. At the same time, Zhao Yuanfeng and the elder from the Zhao clan also rushed over. Together with Yun Mingzi, who had been beaten to the point of vomiting blood, they got up again. A total of 5 people at the True Fire Spirit Refinement Realm surrounded Chu Xiu. Being attacked by so many True Fire Spirit Refinement Realm powerhouses at the same time, even Xiang Chong, who had previously unleashed the power of the 9 dragon seal, did not receive such treatment. There was a hint of coldness in Chu Xiu's eyes, but he did not retreat. At the moment, almost all of Elder Wei and the others were injured. If he did not appear, they might really not be able to resist. Therefore, at the moment, the more firepower he could attract, the better. It would be best to let the battle fall into his own rhythm. In fact, the entire battle had unknowingly fallen into Chu Xiu's rhythm. As soon as he appeared, he gained the upper hand, so Yun Mingzi and Han Jusi paid great attention to him, and they focused all their strength on him. In fact, if Han Jusi and the others spread out and desperately tried to kill Wei Shuya and the others, Chu Xiu could only rescue them first. Chapter 1027. In terms of attracting hatred, Chu Xiu was considered to be quite talented. Just like now, as long as he stood out, he would immediately become the target of everyone's attacks. Of course, this was exactly what Chu Xiu needed. The 5 people attacked together, but Chu Xiu ignored them and charged toward Yun Mingzi first. Seeing Chu Xiu's action, Yun Mingzi was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood again. Just now, Chu Xiu was aiming at him. Now, with so many people attacking together, he was obviously the last one. Why did they target him? Yun Mingzi had already experienced Chu Xiu's power, and he didn't want to experience it again. Holding his sword in front of him, Yun Mingzi pinched a Taoist seal with his hand. In an instant, the Taoist runes bloomed in front of him. Lu Changlu of the real martial arts sect waved the horsetail whisk in his hand. Extremely pure qi of heaven and earth was gathered in the horsetail whisk by him and wrapped around Chu Xiu. His horsetail whisk was left by Ning Xuanji in the past. The Taoist connotation was self-generated, and the qi of heaven and earth that was drawn over was extremely pure. It was as if the world itself was restraining Chu Xiu. At the same time, Han Jusi's figure followed closely behind. One by one, the Taoist patterns were quickly drawn in his hand and hovered around his body. Han Jusi's hands seemed to be holding the sun and the moon. 2 forces, clear and muddy, condensed in front of him. Heaven and earth furnace, yin and yang creation. The 2 forces reached an extremely delicate balance in his arms. As the power of the Taoist patterns flourished, Han Jusi smashed toward Chu Xiu's seal. The huge furnace that was condensed by the qi of heaven and earth and yin and yang also went straight toward Chu Xiu. The power contained in it was simply shocking. Lu Changlu and Han Jusi were both from the real martial arts sect. At this time they cooperated with each other very well. Lu Changlu was a gentle person. He was a well-known kind person in the martial world. Even his martial arts attack power was not too strong. On the contrary, it was miraculous for him to assist from the side. In Han Jusi's era, even the Dao sects were very aggressive. Therefore Han Jusi was more radical. However, at this time when the 2 of them joined forces, their martial arts complemented each other. The power was also shocking. Immediately after, Zhao Yuanfeng's finger landed. The force of his finger penetrated the void. It was invisible and intangible, but it caused the surrounding air to emit a violent sonic boom. Wave-breaking finger could split water and break waves. If this was used in the sea, it would be enough to shake the waves for a few miles. The elder from the Zhao clan also slammed his palm down. The palm force transformed into a boundless giant wave, and its power was incomparably vast. It was also Chu Xiu's first time fighting with so many true fire spirit refinement realm martial artists of the same level. Zhao of Xiu of 1, he was more powerful than of was. The reason was very simple. When facing a person alone, even if you wanted to fight to the end, you would only need to focus on that person. However, in the face of being surrounded by so many people, it was inevitable that one's energy would be scattered, especially when the people surrounding you were not weak. If you were careless in any aspect, it could lead to your defeat. However, Chu Xiu's method of breaking out of this situation was very simple. Since there were so many of them, he would kill as many as he could until there were fewer of them. Chu Xiu's body was burning with internal true fire. At the same time, it was mixed with the black world extinguishing fire. A powerful force suddenly broke out. After the world extinguishing fire broke free from Lu Changliu's restraint, it followed the trajectory of Lu Changliu's true qi. It moved toward his horsetail whisk and even his body. The power of the world extinguishing fire was evil. At least, Lu Changlu did not want to be touched by it. Therefore he began to retreat. His Taoist connotation burst out to resist the world-extinguishing fire. The evil moon saber was held in Chu Xiu's hand. As the saber fell, the twisted blood moon turned into a sharp blood line in an instant, tearing and cutting everything. The saber essence of the break formula slashed out. Everything in front of him was almost cut in half. Space was cut and time was torn. The huge furnace formed by the yin and yang power of heaven and earth was extremely violent and unstable. As long as the Taoist pattern on it melted, it would immediately explode. However, under the attack of Chu Xiu's break formula, the furnace was neatly cut in half. Heaven returned to heaven, earth returned to earth, yin returned to yin, and yang returned to yang. It was as if that power had never existed. In the blink of an eye, it had already dissipated between heaven and earth. However, Chu Xiu's break formula didn't stop. It continued to slash at Han Jusi. A Taoist sword with talismans carved on it was held in Han Jusi's hand. In an instant, 81 talismans were pointed out by the long sword. His speed was even faster than the sword cultivators of the 5 major sword sects. However, it was still useless. Under the saber essence of Chu Xiu's break formula, the power of the saber was simply invincible. 81 talismans were laid out in an instant. However, they were instantly destroyed by Chu Xiu. At this moment, the scorching pure yang sword light fell. Yun Mingzi, who had been abandoned by Chu Xiu as a target, made a timely move and blocked in front of Han Jusi. There was a loud explosion. Yun Mingzi had finally helped Han Jusi block Chu Xiu's saber. However, his divine weapon Taoist sword, which had already been chipped, was completely cut in half by Chu Xiu's break formula. Han Jusi looked at Yun Mingzi with lingering fear and said in a low voice, "Thank you." Yun Mingzi's expression was somewhat complicated. He looked at Chu Xiu and said with an indescribable complex expression, "We miscalculated." Han Jusi's expression also changed. "Yes, we miscalculated." Their target this time was Chu Xiu, but their miscalculation was also on Chu Xiu. They had never imagined that Chu Xiu's strength would actually be so powerful. It was simply powerful to the point of being unreasonable. Yun Mingzi gritted his teeth and said, "Delay. Even if we can't win, we must delay. As long as we block the Yinma clan and the Northern Yen martial world, the Northern Yen Imperial Court will not be able to hold on for long. When the Northern Yen Imperial Court is completely defeated, it will also be the day that Chu Xiu's foundation is destroyed. At that time, even if they don't lose here, their foundation in Northern Yen will be burned to the ground and their vitality will be greatly damaged." Han Jusi also nodded calmly, but he did not know that they had miscalculated more than this. At this moment, Chu Xiu had just used the break formula to cut Yun Mingzi's weapon in half, and Zhao Yuanfeng's powerful wave breaker finger had already arrived in front of him. Without dodging, Chu Xiu's Mahakala Devil God Dharma form suddenly appeared behind him. In his third eye, the scorching hot destructive fire suddenly burst out, meeting the wave breaker finger's wave breaker finger. When the two collided, the scattered world-extinguishing flames landed on the ground, instantly burning a huge pit. At this moment, Chu Xiu's figure shot out like a cannonball. His body was burning with internal true fire, and he punched out directly at the Zhao family elder. No one present had expected that Chu Xiu would suddenly change his target. The power of the punch was even more shocking. Chu Xiu's figure had already arrived in front of the Zhao family elder, and suddenly a sonic boom was heard. It was earth-shattering, and the domineering fist intent seemed to be tearing the sky and earth apart. Not long ago, Chu Xiu had used such a punch to kill Bailey Pobing, the East Sea's #1 warrior. This Zhao family elder was not young and he looked like he was about to die. He could not be compared to Bailey Pobing at all. The palm strength that was considered powerful in the eyes of others was extremely fragile in the eyes of Chu Xiu. Feeling the power of Chu Xiu's punch, the Zhao family elder was extremely shocked. While withdrawing his power, the Zhao family elder shouted in horror, "Save me!" Although Zhao Yuanfeng could not stand the Zhao family elder using his seniority to suppress him, he was, after all, a true fire refinement state expert of Jiangshan Pavilion. He was a part of Jiangshan Pavilion's power, and he could not just watch him die here. The others present were the same and they all rushed toward Chu Xiu. It was true that they did not have any friendship with the Zhao family elder. But now they had a common enemy and that was Chu Xiu. They were all true fire refinement state warriors and no one was so short-sighted. At this time they were still playing the game of fighting on their own, allowing Chu Xiu to defeat them one by one. However, just as they were about to make a move, the Mahakala Devil God Dharma idol that had intercepted Zhao Yuanfeng before suddenly exploded, and a large amount of world-destroying fire instantly enveloped all of them. Condensing the Dharma idol consumed a lot of spiritual qi. Suddenly destroying the Dharma idol consumed so much that even Chu Xiu's face turned pale. However, all of this was no longer important. With Chu Xiu's current physical strength, his punch had completely shattered the Zhao family's elder's palm force and protective aura with just pure strength alone, completely turning his arm into a bloody mist. The Zhao family elder howled miserably, and a stream of light appeared around him. In the midst of the explosion, water vapor filled the air, but it forcibly reduced the power of Chu Xiu's punch by half. After all, the Zhao family elder was in existence in the true fire refinement state. Although the Zhao family elder was not very strong, he still had some trump cards. Otherwise, Chu Xiu's punch could have easily killed him. But before he could react, Chu Xiu had already arrived in front of him, grabbed him by the neck and said coldly, "Is overseas not enough for you Jiangshan Pavilion to play with? You want to come to the Central Plains to stir up trouble? The Qing dynasty has fallen, and you still want to restore the country and pretend to be a royal family? You're just a group of poor people who don't know what you're talking about." The Zhao clan's elder had yet to react to what the great Qing dynasty was. Their Zhao clan's previous name was not Qing either. At the next moment, Chu Xiu's fist had already appeared before his eyes. With a loud explosion, Chu Xiu's fist smashed the Zhao clan's elder's head into pieces. He then casually threw the headless corpse to one side. The whole battlefield suddenly fell into a strange silence. The righteous path and the devil path had been fighting for so long that even Shang Tianliang, who was in the mysterious realm of heaven and earth, had been injured. But it was the first time that an existence in the true fire refinement state had fallen, and he had died so miserably. Seeing the Zhao family elder's headless body thrown to the ground like a pile of rotten meat, the warriors of the righteous path suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.